The stranger lay on the ground, breathing heavily. Coughing, he said that he could give no more. Next to him lay a sword. He must have been a swordsman once. The young man no longer had the strength to fight. Opposite him stood another young man with a gloomy face, like a demon. The young man looked intently at his opponents. Then he smiled broadly and boldly said that it seemed that victory was his. Smiling somewhat awkwardly, the boy moved his wings lightly. The main character's name is Yuki. He now looks like a demon, although he used to be an ordinary man named Sagawa Yuki. Everything changed after he was reborn and got a new appearance. And when the young man was born a second time, he received a special gift that far exceeded the capabilities of an ordinary person. However, instead of being reborn as a human, he was reborn as a demon. The horn in the middle of his forehead and the wings behind his back clearly indicate that he is no longer human. Yuki couldn't help but look at those who had already been defeated. It seemed to her that these guys on the floor were from the hero team, but now they were just lying unconscious on the ground. They had already gone halfway to the Demon Lord's castle and were climbing higher and higher. Strong demons were appearing around them, and ahead was a room with the master. The hero understands. Although they were already halfway there, Yuki still didn't know how to behave in such a difficult situation. Until the hero defeats the Demon Lord, peace and harmony will not reign in the world. If the hero suddenly loses even to a simple demon, everything around will instantly plunge into panic and chaos. The protagonist smiled, thinking that it would be a real disaster if the world fell into chaos. But right now, the most important thing is to heal the wounded heroes and quietly carry their bodies to the nearest village. Yuki carefully examined the bodies of the defeated and wondered how he would explain to the higher demons that these people had simply escaped. He looks closely at the blonde-haired youth and realizes that he is a human hero named Yuga. Memories flash through his mind of that hero loudly shouting something about the sacred sword Excalibur, brandishing the weapon right in front of him. In response, Yuki only smiled and responded with a powerful flash of magic. Now the main character thinks, first we need to move this guy, but who should we choose next to save first? Then he looked at the girl and thought that the next person to join the hero's team would be a young sorceress named McKenna. Even before the start of the battle and during the duel itself, she did not take her eyes off the hero, casting seductive glances at him every now and then. This made the young man incredibly angry, so he couldn't hold back and almost immediately exploded in anger at this magical girl. The third member of the team was a serious swordsman named Raven. He hardly spoke and seemed cold, but his appearance was too ostentatious. This swordsman annoyed the protagonist just by his appearance, so at the beginning of the battle, the hero used powerful dark magic to eliminate him. The hero cast a spell that supposedly made the swordsman disappear, but in reality, he only made him invisible. So no one around even noticed him. But just when the hero and the magician were entangled in their own experiences, the young man suddenly used magic and blew them both up. At that moment, the hero felt nothing. Now, only the last member of the team of heroes remains on the battlefield. Meet Cecilia, a young woman who serves as a priestess. After he defeated the last members of the hero's team, he wondered what to do with her next. The main character hurried with wide strides behind the priest, completely disconnected from everything that was happening around her. Yuki looked at Cecilia and, making sure she was safe and sound, decided there was no need to use healing magic on her. The young man looked closely at the girl and was surprised at how defenseless she looked in this state. The main character was sure. For him, this girl personified true, ideal beauty. He considers keeping the girl as his prisoner, but he knows that if he does anything too bold, the Lord will be angry with him. However, if he does have to face the Demon Lord himself, he is almost certain that he can defeat him. But even so, keeping people captive is morally unjust. The main character orders his servants. This is the last person. He must be carried. The servants humbly agree to carry out the order. The young man says goodbye to his angel. 3 days later, a team of desperate heroes, the hero himself, a cocky swordsman, a cunning mage, and a wise priest, daringly break into the Demon Lord's domain. The protagonist laughed happily as he saw the hero and a stubborn bunch of fools reappear as if they had no problems. He introduced himself as Yuki, the leader of the Dark Knights, and promised that this time he would personally send them all straight to hell. Yuki suddenly realized that he would have to inform the entire group of heroes about his low rank, and he would have to do it confidently, as if it were no problem at all. Immediately, the hero announced that Yuki's name, as it turned out, belonged to the same demon. Then he loudly announced that Yuki was already preparing for battle. The protagonist managed to jump aside from the powerful blow, and in the air, while his body was flying, he glanced at the priestess Cecilia. The young man deftly dodged both the magical girl's magical attack and the swordsman's techniques. But suddenly he froze and turned his gaze to Cecilia. She couldn't understand why this demon was looking so intently at her. Suddenly, the hero is interrupted by a young man and orders the boy to fight with full force. Yuki was embarrassed, apologized to this young man, and at the same time thought that for some reason he just looked at this girl. He admits that he is a bit rough with enemies who are fighting at full strength. Then the young man uses the highest level of dark magic, a special skill called Endless Darkness. The hero looked at the demon in horror. He felt terrible. Fear gripped his entire being. As a result, Yuki neutralized all members of the hero team. They lay silently on the ground, showing no signs of life. The young man approached the girl and was relieved to see that she had no visible injuries. She was truly incredible. She had instantly used barrier magic to protect herself. This reassured him. He unexpectedly healed the hero's team again, then left their bodies in a nearby village. But a month later, when the heroes tried to attack again, he easily repelled their attack. Eventually, the demon lord himself and his powerful supporters began to consider the hero's team too weak. He didn't like to say it, of course, but he was really not like everyone else. If it weren't for him, the team of heroes would have definitely defeated the demon lord by now. The boy lies on the bed and thinks, very soon he will allow them to move on. However, he is sure. This girl is not only beautiful, she also has a wonderful character. And next time, he will definitely do everything as he planned. After a while, the hero's team appeared. The witch girl turned to the hero named Yuga and said that today they must finally defeat this annoying demon and move on. The protagonist calmly looked at the hero team that was just approaching and thought that this guy's name was really Yuga. He thought that it was not necessary to call him boring at all. He looked at the stern swordsman and thought that he had not changed. He was still silent and reserved. Evaluating the young man himself, he noted, he was silent, although perhaps he could say something. Priestess Cecilia urged everyone to fight to the limit of their abilities, and the young man thought that his angel still looked surprisingly cute. He closes his eyes and thinks about all the things he needs to do. Yuki laughed as he saw the stubborn fools who had recently returned come for their own again. He was the leader of the Dark Knights, known as Yuki. It seemed like he was ready to send all those insolent enemies straight to hell. The hero and the swordsman rushed into battle. The young man loudly exclaimed that he was ready to fight. However, in his thoughts he understood. Against such insanely strong opponents they had almost no chance, because the enemy's abilities could be called a real fraud. Gradually they became more and more aware of their powerlessness in this battle. He decided that this was enough for today. The young man turned to the hero and asked with an ironic smile if he still hadn't realized that he could never defeat him. The hero asked, "So what? He must fight for those who are suffering now." In that case, Yuki simply pointed at Cecilia and ordered the hero to leave the girl there. If the hero fulfilled the condition, he promised to let everyone else pass unhindered. The hero, the swordsman, and Cecilia were very surprised, but the sorceress couldn't help but laugh softly. Yuki loudly declared that he would never agree to this, because Cecilia was an irreplaceable friend to him. He asked his interlocutor if he was really ready to miss such an opportunity. As a result, the deal was cancelled, and they decided to start their journey again from the nearest village. The young sorceress exclaimed to Yuga that it was worth agreeing to this deal. The young man addressed her by the name of Makana and asked in surprise what she was talking about. The main character watched all this carefully. She turned to Yuga and asked him to think about it. The young man, although he seemed boring, had considerable magical abilities and put saving the world first. He himself was mentally upset that he had been called boring again, and thought that he had already asked not to be called that again. The hero Yuge became angry and said that even the thought of being separated from Cecilia seemed unbearable to him. The magical girl replied that Cecilia wouldn't be able to do it right away, but if they defeated the demon lord and came back for her before anything happened, everything would be fine. The young man replied that they understood everything. So now they are leaving, and Cecilia is staying here. The main character, Grind, ordered them to move on. Yuga looked at Cecilia and confidently promised that they would definitely come back for her, and this time he wouldn't let her down. The door closed, and the boy thought they were finally alone. But suddenly he felt a slight anxiety begin to grip him. Cecilia stood guard, fully understanding that her strength was not enough to even injure the demon. But still, she was ready to fight the young man to her last breath. The girl was about to use the holy laser skill when suddenly the main character raised his hands in front of him and politely asked her to stop for a moment. Cecilia asked what had happened and if it was possible that the young man was just waiting for her to lose her guard. The protagonist denied this, saying that this was not the case at all, and assured her that he was speaking sincerely. The girl asked, "Then what's the matter? Does the boy really want to make fun of her before killing her?" The young man replied that if he really wanted to kill, he would have done it at the very beginning. At the same time, his heart was beating wildly. All he wants is to confess his feelings to the girl. The young man sincerely says that he fell in love with her at first sight. He gathers up the courage and asks the girl to give them a chance and start a relationship. The main character looked at the girl with embarrassment, and she was sincerely shocked by his confession. The girl suddenly bows and apologizes to the young man. This apology so surprised the young man that he was left stunned. Huddled in a corner, he hugged his knees. The protagonist sadly confessed. He had been rejected, and now everything was lost. In despair, he thought that he wanted to die. The girl, seized by panic, did not dare to approach and asked if the guy was really okay. Cecilia suddenly stopped and stepped back from the young man, declaring him her enemy. She began to cast spells and attack, then asked in surprise why he did not resist her blows at all. The main character replied to her that she had rejected him, so now all he could do was wish for death. The girl shyly exclaimed that the young man should not joke with her like that. In response, Yuki said that even when she was angry, she seemed very cute to him, although, he said it didn't matter now. The young man explained that the whole thing was that if he lived, he would be forced to stay in this room forever. All he had left to do was attack people, but she didn't want to do that at all. The girl replies that she has never encountered demons like this young man before. According to her, demons are usually cruel and savage. The main character replied that he was a human in his previous life and was reincarnated. He does not hide the truth. His name is Sagawa Yuki, and he once died in an accident. The girl was surprised that he had really been reborn. Cecilia wondered if he could ever have been human, and then she added, if so, why doesn't he want to join them, the humans? The main character, Grand, thought, if he told the girl that he was a friend of people, she would believe him. The girl asks why he doesn't just defeat the demon lord. Wouldn't that solve all his problems? But the boy just shakes his head and replies that he would never do that. After all, after defeating the demon lord, he will most likely have to become the next demon lord. So he will remain tied to this room. He is already tired of this life. So he took the opportunity and confessed his feelings to the girl. That was how he decided to end his life as a demon. He added that her team was very strong, so he had little doubt that they would be able to defeat the demon lord. He smiles and assures her that everything will be perfect. But the girl comes closer and quietly says that in reality, everything is not so. Cecilia remarks that this young man is very strong, so why shouldn't he use his power to benefit people? With such incredible power, wouldn't this young man be able to transform into an ordinary person? Then he could easily become a part of human society. She reaches out her hand to him and asks if he is willing to go with her to the outside world. It was on that day that the Dark Lord's rule was overthrown, and peace and tranquility reigned in the world. Some time passed in the capital of Manurva. All the inhabitants were sincerely happy because the brave hero had finally returned home. The news that the hero had defeated the demon lord instantly spread throughout the world, and people everywhere erupted in joy. Manurva, the capital of the Clarence Kingdom, even held a grand parade in honor of the hero. While the momentous event was taking place, he finally reached the Adventurers Guild. The young man looked at the building and realized that this was the place he had been looking for. After Cecilia convinced the protagonist to escape from the demon lord's castle, he decided to escape. Having received a map from Cecilia, the hero headed to his new goal, the city of Manurva. Meanwhile, the other members of the hero team were informed that he had disappeared, adding that he was playing in a box. A young man walks into the Adventurers Guild. He apologizes for disturbing you and politely asks to be registered as a new member of the guild. One man remarked in surprise that he didn't expect to see anyone here today, as the city was holding a parade in honor of the hero team. The man's name was Kleiman, and he yawned boredly, looking intently at the young man. The protagonist was surprised by this behavior, but gathered his courage and said that he wanted to register with this guild. Yuki wondered in his heart if this man really had eyes like a dead fish, and if everything was okay with him, because he looked quite strange. The man asked in surprise if the man really wanted to become a member of the guild. He added with confusion that all the workers were absent now, and he had no idea what to do next. In his eyes, all the workers were just children who only found time to admire the hero. Then he finds everything he needs. He hands the young man a piece of paper and asks him to write down his details. Basically, all he needs to do is state his name, age, and sign that he takes responsibility for his death. After a while, the young man reaches out to collect his prize. The man takes the paper and reads it out loud. The boy's name is Yuki, and he is 21 years old. The man then hands Yuki a gift card, his own prize. He asks him to try not to lose the girl, because finding a replacement for her will cost the guy a lot of money. If he does lose her, let it happen within 3 days, because this painstaking process is quite exhausting, and he will have to decide everything himself. Yuki replied that he understood everything, but he didn't think the rest of the staff would be back for at least 3 days. Looking at Clayman, he realized that this man really hated his job, but there was a limit to any laziness. The man says that everything is decided, and now the young man needs to gather his strength and do everything possible in 3 days. If he fails, then the man himself will have to fulfill all the requests. That day, the young man ignored all the man's complaints, instead diligently fulfilling his numerous requests and immediately processing each completed task. He constantly grumbled under his breath, but thought only one thing. Although it was troublesome, it was no longer the hero's problem. In the evening, he laid down on his bed and thought, from now on, he must raise his rank and save money. As soon as he can save enough for a normal life, he will confess his feelings to Cecilia again. Next time, she will definitely accept his feelings. This thought made the main character so happy that he couldn't close his eyes all night. A week had passed since he joined the guild. During that time, the boy had completed enough tasks and raised his rank to D level. The man turns to the young man with interest. Does he not notice the beautiful young ladies here? Everyone else brings their ready-made requests here. So why is this guy turning to him personally? Yuki smiles and admits that at first he thought that these charming ladies must all be secretaries. But later he got used to the fact that it was the man who did the secretarial work for this guild. The man shouted that he had caused more work. Yuki thought that even though the other workers had already returned to their work, he still continued to submit completed tasks to get approval. He might have complained about him too, but Yuki knew that he was doing a good job. Yuki said that it was a man's job, so everything was fine, and there was no point in complaining. The man objected, saying that he was not a secretary at all. The day when the parade was held in honor of the hero had long passed. But the main character did not even listen to the end of his grumbling and immediately began to interrupt. However, suddenly everyone heard some commotion nearby. Yuki immediately asked what happened. The protagonist turned around and suddenly noticed a familiar figure apologizing to the crowd and politely asking to let her pass further. Yuki was confused. Suddenly she saw Cecilia. The whole group of neighbors was surprised. No one could understand why Ms. Cecilia, a famous member of the hero team, appeared here. Some time passed, and Yuki and Cecilia were already sitting in the carriage. The girl apologized, admitting that she sincerely wished she had found the young man sooner. But because of the parade and celebrations, there was absolutely no time left. The young man reassured the girl, asking her not to worry. Finally, he began to live life to the fullest and enjoy every day. He had always dreamed of being in another world. Hearing this, the girl replied with a smile that she was glad to know that he was not bored. Yuki thought about it and remembered that the girl had managed to find him. He praised her for it. The girl admitted in response that she had been worried at first, thinking that the boy must have changed his appearance. However, finding him turned out to be surprisingly easy. She looked at him with disdain, as if he had done something disgusting. Yuki was confused and couldn't figure out what was wrong, so he asked the girl what had happened. Cecilia sighs and asks what the real problem is. She notes that the young man has not changed his name or appearance. The young man asked why he hadn't changed his name, and then suggested that the girl take a closer look. Overcoming the pain, he broke off his horn and tore off his wings. He is scared of the thought that it could all grow back, but at least not so quickly now. The girl said that even after that, the heroes still remember his face. After a while, the coachman told Mrs. Cecilia that they were home. The young man got out of the carriage and saw a large house before him. Suddenly, spears appeared at his throat. One of the guards turned to the young man, asking who he was. The guard also ordered him to immediately step away from Lady Cecilia. The young man looked at the guards indifferently and remembered the rumors that had been circulating in the guild, that some strange person was accompanying Lady Cecilia. Even the coachman on the way looked at him with suspicion. Suddenly, the girl found herself right in front of the young man and confidently told the guards to hide their spears, because this guy was her friend. Yuki glanced at the guards and thought that they didn't seem to like seeing Cecilia around him at all. After a while, the young man and the girl were sitting at the table. Cecilia turned to Yuki and asked if he was ready to leave the guild. Yuki was very surprised and asked what this girl meant. He didn't understand at all why she suddenly said such a thing. Cecilia apologized for her unexpected request. Yuki only thought that he had just joined the guild. The girl asks the young man to give her a chance to explain everything. She agrees that the heroes' team has defeated the Demon Lord. However, this does not mean that the danger from the demons has disappeared. The young man puts his hand to his face and admits that the girl is right. Even if the Demon Lord is gone, his troops still remain. Yes, they are not as strong without a commander, but they can still do a lot of damage. The demons are not afraid now. Their leader is dead, so soon disputes will flare up again between the former allies. Cecilia says that there are rumors. The Gallic Empire, known for its military potential, has already begun active preparations. In every country, including the Kingdom of Clarence, people always strive for the best. So, young ladies and daughters of fallen soldiers from different countries literally showered the hero with marriage proposals. Yuki looked at this and thought, this is it, the real life of a hero. Cecilia points out that it's not just the hero but the whole team. Yuki abruptly approaches the girl and asks if she's really being rude. The girl assures her that, of course, she refuses, but still doubts. Yuki asks why the girl suddenly fell silent. Cecilia explains that if she becomes famous at a time like this, the guy will start receiving similar offers too. That's why the girl wants to hire a young man and pay him for his work. Yuki agrees, because few people know the guy's name. But he asks the girl if she really has enough money to pay for his services. The girl confidently says that Yuki is much stronger than any adventurer of the highest rank. To be honest, even all her wealth would not be enough to hire him. However, the boy is in love with her, which is why she thought so. Yuki notices her confused expression but just smiles, takes off his shoes, and confidently says that this is where it all begins. The main character agrees that he would like to see true love between them, but not the kind that can be bought with money. He laughed and admitted that he had a unique superpower. Even if spies or assassins were working against him, they would be the ones who would be the ones to be defeated. He also laughs and assures that he will not succumb to female temptations, because for him there is only Cecilia, and she is the only one who shines in his eyes. But suddenly the guy realizes he has already returned to the real world and is simply telling the story to the girl in person. Cecilia shuddered, then burst out laughing. She apologized, explaining that she simply couldn't help herself. The main character looks at her in disbelief, waiting for an explanation. At first she refuses to say anything, but eventually sighs and quietly says that now everything is finally over. The girl admitted that she had not expected to hear such an answer. She burst into tears, as if crocodile tears had flowed from her eyes. The young man embarrassedly admitted that in the heat of emotion he had exclaimed something truly strange. The girl admits that she increasingly finds herself thinking, perhaps Yuki was a human in a past life. After all, is there another such funny demon in this world? The main character turns to her and asks if she didn't believe him until now. Cecilia said that she was just making sure of everything once again. Yuki smiled awkwardly, not understanding why she was saying such words. After a while, the girl said that she still had a lot of things to do, so it was time for her to go. The girl smiled and said that today was fun, so she suggested meeting again. Yuki replied that he enjoyed it too, and then added that he had one more request. The boy was embarrassed and asked the girl if he could address her as Cecilia. The girl just smiled and agreed, then added that from now on she would call the young man Yuki. The young man was filled with joy. After saying goodbye to the girl, he headed home. Having arranged to meet Cecilia again, the young man walked home happily, thinking that they had become a little closer to each other. Later, the young man felt true happiness. Today's hike had been wonderful. He had met Cecilia, and he was delighted that his weekend promised to be fun. Then the young man came to the mansion, but he was not allowed in. The guards said that the hero had come to meet the young lady, so the young man should leave here in peace. Yuki understood that, despite the agreement reached, nothing would change anyway. He exhales and decides to walk around the city. While walking, he notices a crowd on the street and wonders what happened here. Then they notice a handsome swordsman who immediately catches the attention of everyone around him. Yuki says he feels like he's seen this guy somewhere before. He is told that it's no surprise. Standing before him is Raven himself, a famous swordsman and the hero's loyal companion. The protagonist looks at the confused swordsman and realizes that he seems to have no idea how to deal with this crowd. The young man decides to help the man because he is in trouble. So the boy shouts loudly to the crowd, indicating the direction in which the hero is heading. Everyone immediately rushed in the direction the young man pointed, deciding that it would be easy. At this time, Raven was left alone and did not understand what to do now. Suddenly, Yuki grabbed his hand and whispered that they urgently needed to escape. After a while, they turn into a quiet alley, and Yuki admits that their escape looked rather funny. He does not forget to glance at the street from time, to notice in time if someone comes towards them, and to be ready to act. The young man wonders if the swordsman will really remain silent in such a situation. He understands that he did not help out of gratitude. And Yuki advises Raven to change clothes so that he can pass on unnoticed. Yuki was about to leave when the boy suddenly asked him to wait. Yuki was surprised when the swordsman spoke. He thought that this young man really impressed him. The main character could not believe that such a cool-blooded, handsome man had a voice like from an anime. The The protagonist asks if the young man has been silent all this time because of his voice. He explains that everyone has things they don't like to talk about, and he has some too. Raven wonders if the protagonist will make fun of his voice. Yuki replies that it's not the boy's fault that he has such a voice. Raven adds that this young man is completely different. He doesn't make fun of his voice. Then Yuki realizes the swordsman seems to be really hurt by it, which is why he's silent almost all the time. The young man replies that he's not laughing at this, because he's met guys with voices like that before. Raven smiles. Yuki wonders if it would be better to leave so that the hero's team doesn't think he's being disrespectful to them. He politely bids the swordsman farewell, but the swordsman suddenly stops him, begging him not to leave. Raven asks Yuki to become his friend. Yuki does not hide his surprise at such an unexpected offer. The swordsman adds that if the young man doesn't want to, it's okay. It's just that out of all the people, only his mother has never laughed at his voice, so he thought that Yuki could become a truly close person for him. The main character thought that he would be happy to make friends. He gave his name and said pleasantly that he was glad to meet him. The swordsman was delighted, introduced himself as Raven, and also sincerely returned the greeting. Yuki thinks that it has been 20 years since he was reborn in this world, and only now has he been able to find a true friend for the first time. Raven says with a slight smile that this young man reminds him of someone from the past, but Yuki just brushes it off, saying that it was just his imagination. After some time, the young man enters the Adventurers Guild and orders breakfast. He considers his breakfast to be very modest, but he feels that if he doesn't eat it, he will be given some task. At that moment, a woman suddenly approaches him and notices that the young man is eating quite interestingly. The main character was surprised, because he didn't even notice when this beautiful woman appeared here. At that very moment, the young man was chewing bread. She says that, as her daughter has already mentioned, this young man is indeed very interesting. Yuki reacts in surprise. The woman smiles and introduces herself. She is Celia Aquarain, Cecilia's mother. She is very pleased to meet Yuki. The young man looks at you in surprise, then smiles and says he's very pleased to meet you. But suddenly, grabbing the entire bowl of salad, he lifts it up and in an instant eats every last leaf. The young man awkwardly asked the woman what she wanted from him. Celia laughed and remarked that the boy shouldn't eat so quickly. She praised him and added that he was indeed extremely interesting. The woman says she was informed about their guard's rude behavior towards the young man the other day, so she came to apologize in person. Yuki was surprised and admitted that he had previously felt like he was being treated poorly. However, because of the meeting scheduled for later, he didn't take it too seriously. He believes that Celia is actually not such a bad person. The woman asked boldly about the meeting the young man had mentioned. She had heard that he was passionately in love with Cecilia. Celia asked what the relationship was between this young man and her daughter. Embarrassed, the boy panicked and denied everything, hastily declaring that he was seeing his boyfriend. The woman smiled and admitted that she had misunderstood. It would be a real disaster if her daughter got involved with a bad person. She apologized for suspecting the boy. Yuki was shaking all over, but assured her that everything was fine. Celia assures him with a smile that everything is fine, and then suggests that the young man go with her. Yuki asks in surprise where she is calling him. To this, the woman replies with almost cheerful insult. Is that not clear? She is waiting for him at her estate. Then the woman asks if the young man wants to see her daughter Cecilia. Yuki nods happily and replies with a smile that he really wants to meet Cecilia. After a while, they approach the estate. The young man turns to Celia and wonders who the guards are standing at the gate. Then he notices that these guards are completely different from the ones before. The woman notes that those guards were rude to the guest, so this cannot be ignored. She asks the young man if he wants to know the details, however the guy refuses. Celia laughs and tells him not to worry. The guards just got a beating from their headmaid. Their headmaid is a former A-rank adventurer. Due to certain circumstances, she left her dangerous profession and took a job at their home. The young man thinks that A-rank must be extraordinary strength. Celia smiles in response. When she is angry, she can be really scary, but she always supports her husband and cares for him. Once there was a big fight between her and her husband, and only 6 months ago he finally recovered from a serious injury. He's also an A-rank adventurer, so it only cost him a bruise. It's a good thing they managed to find a nurse for the hostess. They seem to be a truly happy couple. Yuki thought to herself. She seemed a little worried about her husband. The girl smiled and remarked that she was easy to talk to. A charming maid approached them and politely greeted her mistress. She notices Yuki behind the hostess's back and immediately introduces herself. She is the Aquarine family's maid, and her name is Sophia. The young man greets Sophia and gives her name, but mentally notes that this girl does not look ordinary at all. Celia anxiously asked Sophia if her husband was okay. She just shook her head sadly and replied that he was not well at all. He was constantly fainting, and it would be a long time before he was back to his old self. Yuki mentally decides to pray for those guards. Meanwhile, Sophia turns to the lady and the young man and tells them that she will give them a tour of the estate. Then Celia waved to Yuki and called him to come over. He looked in the doorway and saw Cecilia there, dressed very lightly. The girl noticed the surprised looks around her and was quite confused herself by the attention. Suddenly, Celia abruptly stepped aside, while Yuki continued to watch the girl. But Celia couldn't stand it anymore. She shouted to the whole house, asking what Yuki was doing here. Celia laughed and admitted that her daughter definitely didn't like waking up early. Meanwhile, the beaten boy lay on the ground and thought that Celia had deliberately framed him. Moreover, Cecilia's magic blow turned out to be unexpectedly powerful. Later, Cecilia got dressed and looked at Yuki, who was still on his knees. She turned to her daughter and asked her to forgive the boy, because he still looked good. The young man agreed, adding that it was because of his mother. Yuki asked why the woman had brought him here. The woman replied that she had recently seen him talking to Cecilia at their house. She said that she had been watching them. The frightened boy hurriedly asked if the woman had really heard what they were talking about. Cecilia, imitating the young man, cheerfully repeated his words about the fact that in his eyes, there is only Cecilia. She even copied his funny pose. Yuki suddenly realized that this woman had seen the whole scene and understood his feelings. He turned to her in embarrassment, jokingly asking her to kill him with shame. Then Cecilia smiles and says that now it is time to move on to the really important issues. The young man understands well. Cecilia has many marriage proposals. He remembers how she told him about arranged marriages. Celia reports that one of these proposals came from the hero. Frightened, Yuki immediately asked what this meant. Celia explained with a smile that it seemed that the hero had fallen in love with Cecilia. Yuki immediately asked how she reacted to this proposal. Celia replied that she had refused. The woman asked the young man not to worry, but the hero did not even think of backing down. Yuki, not holding back her emotions, shouted and asked what was wrong with this guy. Meanwhile, he categorically ordered him not to fall in love with her, because there was already a magician in their team. However, the hero swore that nothing would stand in the way of his love. Celia smiled and asked what the young man thought of the hero. It seemed that he loved Celia very much. The girl also confessed that she wanted to ask Yuki something. The woman asked if he wanted to marry Cecilia. Suddenly the girl blushed and asked her mother to stop such conversations. However, Cecilia interrupted them and decided that there should be clear answers. Yes or no. The young man thought for a moment, because he felt that perhaps this was his only chance. Yuki bows his head and sincerely apologizes. He admits that the woman's offer is indeed very tempting. He also confessed his feelings to Cecilia, but was rejected. But he is not going to give up. When he changes for the better and becomes a decent person, he will definitely open his heart to her again. But suddenly, when she spoke about marriage, it surprised him very much. The woman calmly noted that she had heard enough. Smiling, she informed the boy that he had passed a kind of test. She was not going to give her daughter to the first person who came her way. Yuki shouted, asking if the woman had deceived him again. But in response, she only sighed. If some bad person were to pick on her daughter, it would be a real disaster. But if a young man became her friend, she would only be happy. The woman with kind eyes looks intently at the young man. Yuki feels that Celia has a special affection for him for some reason. After some time, the young man reached the Ursel forest. Today, he had to enter this terrible forest for an errand. Since he started working in the guild, the boy had already risen to the rank of C. He has been working hard lately, because he learned that the heroine has a crush on Cecilia. He wants to become at least a little like him. The young man came here with a mission, to tame the curly-haired one, who was supposed to be hiding somewhere here. Yuki was walking by and suddenly noticed something moving in the bushes nearby. Following his own intuition, the boy sensed danger and instantly jumped to the side. Landing on his feet, Yuki was already ready for battle. He decided not to delay and immediately use magic against the stranger. But suddenly a headless knight appears before him. He stops and addresses Yuki, calling her captain. This surprises him, and he turns to a girl named Duke. He remembers how, during his life in the castle, she was Dolahan's subordinate. When Cecilia convinced him, he silently left everything behind. It turns out she is alive. Knight ran up to the captain and began to ask where his wings and horns had gone. She curiously asked where he had been all this time. When the young man disappeared, the demon lord had been defeated, so everyone was worried and went in search of him. The young man asked everyone to calm down. The Duke reported that Happiness and Chick were also worried. Yuki was surprised and asked if those two were really here too. The Duke clarified that there was a place a little further on where they had agreed to meet. She then asked the captain to go with her. After a while, a girl with wings and a cute young man appear. They approach the captain and inform him that he is alive. One of them looked like a real angel from heaven. The cheerful Knees was a harpy, and the stylish Chick was a pixie. Both of them obeyed Yuki. She threw herself into Yuki's arms. The boy gently ran his hand through her hair and reassured her that they were still alive. The Duke asked Yuki not to dwell on the thought of his own death. Pixie laughed and said that after the hero and his team defeated the Lord, 3 fugitives left the castle. While they were running away, Duke kept crying and calling for the captain. Yuki realized that these friends always cared about him and thought about him even in difficult times. The Duke explained that she couldn't help herself because she was very worried about where he had disappeared to. Geppen said that you shouldn't leave the boy alone, and she added that sometimes the young man changes dramatically and starts shouting strange words. Yuki finally realized that he didn't like what the girls thought of him at all. The girls from Shiku happily said that they were lucky to find him. But immediately after that, they asked where the captain's horns and wings had gone. To this, Yuki calmly replied that he had torn them out himself and simply threw them away. Suddenly everyone rushed to the captain, trying to find out what the young man had done. At this time, Pixie laughed loudly, and Yuki carefully watched and listened to every word addressed to him. Yuki also said that he once confessed his feelings to a cute priestess from the hero's team, but she rejected him, after which he became an ordinary person. The girls looked at the young man in horror, not knowing what to say. The Duke turned to the young man and asked why he was pursuing this girl. After all, everyone has a family, and it is really very sad. The main character says that he is now called Yuki, and is no longer the captain of the girls. This means that from now on they are free and can live as they wish. The Duke objected, and firmly stated that the captain remained the captain. Geppen supported him, adding that she herself did not want to take on the role. Yuki was about to deny everything, but the Duke interrupted him and asked if the priestess was really beautiful. Happens immediately replied that the girl was not only beautiful, but also had a wonderful figure. Yuki noticed with surprise that the girls did not listen to him at all. The girl began to whisper that the captain was now a man in love, so it was time for them to meet her immediately. The girls turned to the boy, and in a stern tone ordered him to lead them to her. Yuki replied that he was very busy at the moment because he had to tame the chickens, so he didn't have time to take care of them. To this, the girls said that they accepted the task. At that moment, Happings replied that the task was completed, and it was now time to move on. Behind her lay a multitude of dead monsters. Yuki replied that if the girls thought so, they should be prepared for any surprises. The girls just smiled and agreed. Over time, they began to look like ordinary people, and even the Duke gained a human head. To keep her head from falling off, the Duke tied her helmet directly to her armor. She admitted that the whole situation annoyed her. The young man also thought that without the wings, she looked like an ordinary beauty, because his small wings could be hidden under her clothes. The problem arose with the happy Nace. Since she is a harpy, feathers grow on her arms and legs. The guy, respecting her desire, decided to help and carefully removed all the feathers from her body. He thought that this was what Happiness was looking for, so he had nothing to regret. Later, the young man went to the Adventurers Guild and reported that he had dealt with the chickens. Clem asked without asking if these 3 were really Yuki's friends. After that, having transformed into beautiful people, Yuck led all 3 to Cecilia's estate. Sometime after arriving at the estate, Cecilia told Yuka that it was simply awful. Happens complained to Cecilia about the feathers. She hugged the priest tenderly and replied that he was a very kind man. Cecilia told Yuki that no matter how important it was to pretend to be human, you still had to consider the girl's feelings. You had to think about your actions. Yuki admitted that he had behaved terribly, and now he sincerely regretted it. Cecilia asked the young man if they were all just former subordinates of Yuki. It seemed to her that they treated him with great respect. The Duke replied that this estate was indeed very spacious, and Cecilia added that only the palace of the Demon Lord could compare in size to it. Yuki replied that it was true now. In fact, the Duke was completely different at first, because Duracons are usually silent and calm. The girl confessed. At first, she hated the captain because he came from a famous demon family that lived in the Lord's castle. Cecilia was surprised, and the Duke explained that the captain was known for his introversion and dislike of people. Once he even told his superior Zakir that he had better leave the room before he lost his self-control. She also said that she tried to convince the captain more than once, but later she just got tired and stopped communicating with him. Cecilia laughed merrily at this story. She said that she had heard various rumors about him, so as a subordinate she decided to sort things out. However, instead of a solution, she just got a good beating. That's how she became who she is now. Yuki recalls that she was his first subordinate at the time, and that was what inspired the guy. Perhaps he left a deep mark on her soul and influenced the girl in many ways. Cecilia asked with interest how he met the other two friends. The main character began to tell how he met Pixie Shake, and then asked where she had gone. He got scared and said that they really left the room. They are now dressed, but anything can happen. Yuki appeared at Sophia and told Capines that she had the perfect angle to attack, so she shouldn't forget about it. Returning to Sophia, Yuki confidently added that she was with her. Sophia was surprised and asked if she was really the new maid. She had been expecting a new assistant to arrive today, and she was sure it was her. Yuki grabbed Capines, who had already changed her clothes, and quickly led her away from Sophia. In response, Sophia apologized, saying that she was very sorry. She added that Capines would make a wonderful maid. Then Yuki realizes that she needs to find Shake. She knows how curious he is, which is why she is most worried about the little pixie. After that, the young man accidentally notices a garden in the window. He realizes that he was so worried in vain. At that moment, he lies with his head on Celia's lap. The woman gently strokes his head and says that he is unhappy and lost in this world. After that, the woman turned to Yuki and asked if he really brought the two girls here. Yuki immediately exclaimed that they were just his friends. Yuki asked if she really didn't bother the woman. Celia smiled and said that she loved children, so he didn't bother her at all. The boy just ran around the garden and played, and she joined him. When they had had enough, he fell asleep. After a while, the guy turns to the girls and asks if they are happy, then announces that it is time to go. Then he turned and asked them not to say that they were going with him. However, Duke confidently declared that they would go anyway. Happens also agreed, and Chick happily added that, of course, they would go with him. From then on they began to live together. But that was not all. The next day the young man came to Cecilia's house, and it was then that he met Capines. Sophia hired Capines as a maid in Aquarina's house. The girl saw the young man off and wished him a pleasant stay. Yuki realized that this girl really had feelings for him. Celia greeted him with joy, clearly pleased with the young man's visit. She invited him to sit next to her, then asked if he had noticed the new maid. Celia asked the young man what his plans were for today, because she wanted Yuki to keep her company on vacation. Recently, she has become very tired because of the discussions about the engagement at team meetings. That is why they want to give her a day off. The young man says that Cecilia is very serious and responsible. She will never refuse work without a good reason. Besides, Cecilia is a real girl who loves to go shopping. She dreams of having a young man accompany her all the time. Yuki, surprised and a little embarrassed, realizes that this is a real date, which he has been officially allowed to go on. Yuki happily agrees and assures her that he will definitely keep her company. Celia smiles and says that is exactly what she expected from him. In fact, the carriage was already waiting for them at the entrance. Celia tells him that Cecilia is waiting for a young man. Some time passes, and the young man leaves the mansion and sees Cecilia before him, extremely beautiful and charming. Yuki apologized to the girl and asked if she had been waiting long. Deep down, the boy knew that these were the words he had always wanted to say. Today, Cecilia was wearing something different than usual, and this look suited her very well. Cecilia assured him that everything was fine. She was sure that if Yuki called, he would come running right away. After a while, Yuki and Cecilia finally reached the city. The young man thoughtfully asked if he really needed to change clothes. Cecilia replied that if she was exposed, it could harm the young man as well. To this, Yuki promised that he would do his best to make everything work out as best as possible. Cecilia smiled and said that she was really looking forward to this moment. The young man and the girl had a wonderful day. They went shopping, where Cecilia chose dresses. She tried on one of them, and Yuki sincerely appreciated her choice. Cecilia was happy that today was really fun. She had been very tired recently, so she decided to get some rest. Yuki was genuinely happy and said that he was very pleased to hear that. Next, they notice an accessories store. Yuki asks Cecilia if she wants to go in, and she agrees. But suddenly their peace is disturbed by a stranger, who pays attention to them. Once this person was a hero and a magician. The young man was surprised to learn that she was Cecilia. The girl blushed with shame and tried to hide her face under her wide-brimmed hat. The hero wanted to shout her name loudly, but Cecilia quickly covered his mouth with her hand, stopping him. She whispered to the young man that they were now hiding. The girl asked why he was calling Cecilia by her first name and if she really wanted to be recognized. The young man says he understands everything and apologizes to Makana and Cecilia. Cecilia smiles and assures him that there is nothing to worry about. The young man sincerely thanks the girl for her forgiveness. Then the hero asks what the girl is doing in this place. He adds with a smile that they haven't taken a day off lately, so they decided to finally go for a walk. His face is filled with joy, and he cheerfully asks if the girl wants to join their company. Yuki starts to get angry, thinking that the hero is not paying attention to him at all. Cecilia politely refuses him, explaining that she is already spending time with a friend. However, the hero is not calmed down, and again wonders who this new friend of hers is. If the hero says he can go with them, because they were also headed to that store, the young man takes the girl's hand and invites her to go with him. Makana and Yuki are left alone. The girl is angry because their meeting with the hero turned into a complete failure. She looks at the guy with sad eyes, confessing how hard it was for her to persuade him to go for a walk with her so they could go shopping like they used to. Yuki recalls the past and imagines that the hero and Makona have been friends since childhood. Despite the fact that the boy seems like an adventurer, she wonders if he is as simple as he seems. Then the girl turns to the young man and asks if he likes the priestess. She noticed that they were together, so it must have been a date. Then she asks if this guy can do better than Yuga, and if Yuga will stop trying to get the priest. She looks at him and realizes that it is difficult to rely on such a gloomy guy. So she changes the subject and suggests that he go with her, because they cannot be left alone. The young man hoped that she would come to his aid, but instead her difficult character was revealed. They enter the store. Cecilia calls Yuki, apologizing to her for going ahead. Yuki doesn't listen very carefully, only noticing that there are many different ornaments. Then he suggests that the girl choose something she likes and says that he will buy her a present. Suddenly, Yuga appears between them and tells the girl that he is also going to buy jewelry, so he suggests that Makami and Cecilia choose what they like. Yuki thought the young man wanted to compete with him, but in fact he had agreed to buy Juri's jewelry only for Cecilia. Yuki began to think about what Cecilia would like, and soon found the perfect piece of jewelry. Then Cecilia puts on a luxurious piece of jewelry and remarks that Yuki has excellent taste. It was a modest pendant with a magical, sparkling stone. Suddenly, Yuga bursts into the room and excitedly tells Cecilia that he chose the jewelry for her. His choice was unexpected. The jewelry was huge and very bright. Yuki realizes that something is clearly wrong with the young man, because he chose a stone that is too big. It is then that Yuga takes off Cecilia's hat and suggests that she decorate it with jewels. At this moment, McCain and Yuki feel a real fright. Everyone around started shouting that it must be Cecilia, and there was a hero standing next to her. If you look closely, it was really McCain next to her. The crowd began to crowd together, pushing and shoving everything around. McCain accused Yuga of being clumsy. The hero called out to Cecilia, and the girl called out to Yuki. After a while, all four of them left the store. Yuki suggested that it be over, and everyone agreed. The boy thought that Yuga would regret it later. The next day, Yuki visited Cecilia's apartment, but was met at the door by an angry Celia. It turned out that Cecilia had fallen ill, which frightened Yuki greatly. He began to ask if the girl was okay. To this Celia replied, trying to calm the young man. The girl is sleeping in her room now. It seems that the emotional upsurge of last night has pretty much exhausted her. Yuki was in despair, believing that it was all because of him. Celia asked the boy not to worry so much. She assured him that it was just a cold that would go away in a few days. She also said that she was not angry with Yuki at all. Yesterday, she asked him to spend time with the girl. However, as for the main character, the woman heard that he wanted to take care of all 6 Cecilias, but still sent him home. She added that yesterday was just a bad day. Yuki was very scared. Celia said that Cecilia said that the young man tried to cheer up the girl yesterday. If there was another opportunity, she would ask to join the company again. If the young man wishes, he can visit Cecilia before leaving. After a while, the young man enters the girl's room and apologizes for yesterday because her valuable day off was wasted. Cecilia assured Yuki that it was not his fault, but the girl abruptly declared that it was all his fault. The young man did not understand and asked what she meant by saying that it was all his fault. The girl replied that her weekend ended like this only because of Yuki, so next time he should try harder. Yuki suddenly blushed and wondered, what did Cecilia's appointment with him really mean? The young man suddenly jumped to his feet and started shouting for the girl to give him everything. He said that although yesterday's date had failed, the next one would definitely be successful, so she should wait for him. Then Sophia kicked him out because her younger lady was more important, and the boy wouldn't shut up. Within a few days, Cecilia had fully recovered. When the excitement had passed, the young man returned to the guild to continue his work. Kleiman was in a great mood and smiling sincerely. He asked Yuki to listen to the news from his life. The man said that his wife had been in an unusually good mood lately. Yuki couldn't understand why he kept listening to this story. Clayman suggested that perhaps something good had happened to her at work, and that she was now treating him especially warmly. Yuki imagined what it would be like if Cecilia became his wife and looked as charming every day as she had that morning when they met. Such thoughts made the boy confused and even started slapping his cheeks, trying to come to his senses. But his fantasies were suddenly interrupted by Clayman, who was surprised by the strange noise in the corridor. Raven appeared at the guild. Yuki couldn't believe his eyes when he saw him. The young man resolutely approached the protagonist and silently pointed his finger towards the exit. Yuki realized that he had been kept quiet by the crowd around him. However, gathering his thoughts, he approached to introduce himself and announced that he wanted to complete the order with Raven. After that, Yuki asked if there was anything interesting here. They were given the task of destroying a stone dragon. It was a B-rank task. Raven lightly tugged on the boy's sleeve, and at that moment Yuki confidently declared that they would get down to business immediately and set off on their journey. Later they rode in a carriage. Yuki was very surprised to learn that Raven did not want to carry out the order. The young man nodded silently, and then Yuki apologized, explaining that he had simply misunderstood him. It turned out that Raven just wanted to go to town with him. The young man smiled and said that it was okay, since he had never done a task with a friend before. Yuki thought the young man was very kind and suggested that Raven have a meal together after they finished their business. They decided to settle everything with him before sunset. Raven agreed with the young man. A little time passed, and Yuki and Raven were already in the forest. The swordsman easily defeated several monsters, then turned to Yuki and informed him that when they were finished here, Raven would like to challenge the young man. Yuki was surprised, as he hadn't even noticed he had killed anyone. Yuki agrees and says, "First you need to kill the dragon." Some time passes, and a dragon appears in the sky. Raven orders Yuki to get ready, and at that moment the young man thinks that his skin is very strong. He says a spell and hopes that it will work. The young man delivers a storm-like blow, piercing the dragon's body through and through. At the same moment, Raven deftly dodges the dragon's attack. Yuki acts decisively again, and Raven ends the fight with a powerful sword strike. The young man praises the swordsman, saying that he did a great job, and that he is glad that it was over so quickly. Raven notes that Yuki made a great shot, and the guild staff will take care of the rest. Later, Yuki and Raven stop by an inn for a bite to eat. There, Yuki asked Raven what he wanted to talk about. Raven asked if Yuki was willing to listen to him, to which the young man replied that he didn't mind as long as it didn't bother him. But Raven confesses that he is in love. The young man himself blushes at his words and is terribly embarrassed. Yuki was genuinely surprised, but Raven clarified that he could only talk about it with the young man. The protagonist involuntarily wondered, does Raven really want to talk about love and ask for advice? He asked Raven what kind of person he was. The young man replied that the girl did not laugh at his voice at all. On the contrary, she envied his voice. He blushed and looked a little confused, like he didn't know how to behave. Yuki thought he was acting exactly like a teenager. Although, after all, he was an attractive man. Yuki thought that Raven was one of the hero's team members, and quite handsome. Overcoming his insecurity about his voice, he knew he had to answer with dignity. The young man jumped up and asked if his interlocutor knew anything about himself. Yuki exclaimed, addressing the young man. He's so handsome and tall, and he's a member of the hero team. If his voice sounds a little strange, don't pay attention to those who laugh at it. He asks me to look at him. An ordinary adventurer with an impassive face. And I can't even remember how many times he's confessed his feelings to me and been rejected just as many times. He assures me that if the guy finally takes action now, everything will definitely work out. Yuki tells Raven to believe in himself. The young man agrees with the protagonist and admits that he is right. He seemed to have thought about it too much. Raven thanked Yuki and admitted that he had done well to ask him for advice. He decided that he would confess his feelings to the girl tomorrow, and then turned to Yuki to ask if he wanted to go with him. The next day, the main character met with Raven and noticed how the young man was shaking violently with fear. Yuki lightly patted the young man on the shoulder and asked him to listen carefully. Then he asked if Raven was really a member of the hero team and the captain of the night squad. And if so, that's really cool. So the young man should gather his courage and start believing in his own strength. The main character encouraged the boy who was following him, saying that he would do well, reminded him how handsome he was, and wished him luck. Some time passed, and finally they reached the place. The young man thought that this was the mysterious aquamarine palace. Raven looked at Yuki and sincerely thanked him. Now he had the opportunity to confess his feelings to the girl. He said that he would leave soon. Yuki finally realizes that Raven's lover was actually Cecilia. It turns out that he himself helped his rival. Yuki rushes from place to place, wondering how Cecilia will react now. After a while, Raven returned. He told Yuki that he had been rejected. The girl said it was impossible. Raven thanked Yuki for her advice. After everything had ended so badly, he announced that he was going home. Yuki felt that the first defeat had left a deep mark. He knew it from his own experience. Now he understood. He absolutely had to meet Cecilia. Later, Yuki met Cecilia, but the girl said that Raven had not visited her. This greatly surprised Yuki, and he began to wonder if Raven had really not visited her. Eventually, Yuki realized that his love was not Cecilia. The girl asked what had happened, and then Yuki decided to tell her everything. Cecilia quickly understood what was going on and suggested that the servants might be involved. Yuki was happy with the idea, and Cecilia promised to ask Sophia. Maybe she knew something. Next, they approached Sophia, and the girl confirms that Mr. Raven did indeed come recently, and then asked to call one of the maids. Sophia says that it seems that he himself asked for new happiness. Then they get closer to happiness. Yuki wondered if the handsome young man with the red hair had approached the girl recently. He confessed his feelings to her, and the girl returned his confession. A happy Ness added that the girl had told him that nothing could happen between them. Yuki said that the girl had already met the swordsman. So can she share exactly how their meeting went? The girl screamed that she couldn't tell him anything, and then ran away. Yuki tried to stop her, but with a confused sigh, she said that this girl would have to come back again anyway. After a while, Yuki says that he wants to discuss the situation with Happiness and Raven. Cecilia agrees, adding that she needs to help Raven, but wonders why the Duke is here. Yuki explains that it's because she's been familiar with happy events for a long time. The girl says she will tell them what happened first. She asks if Yuki and Cecilia know that harpies are a target for hunting. They both agree. Harpies are beautiful demonic creatures. Because of their wings, humans are constantly trying to capture and enslave them, and this continues without end. Of course, luck also plays a role. Once people caught her, but the Duke happened to be nearby and saved the girl. That's how they became friends. That's why Jepini won't be able to be happy with a man who confesses his love to her. Cecilia looked sadly at the Duke as he told her this. Yuki said he didn't think Happy Nose had left such a bad impression on Raven. Cecilia added that Yuki also mentioned that when she heard Raven's voice, she was even a little jealous of him. The Duke replied that the harpies were a people who loved to sing, so it was possible that she was attracted to Raven's voice. Yuki remarked that it would be wonderful if Raven could hear it. The young man said that he would definitely visit Raven in the night building before leaving. A young boy enters Raven's room and finds him exhausted on the couch. Raven guiltily turns to Yuki, admitting that he tried hard to help him. Yuki replies that he's fine, but says he wants to ask something. Yuki wonders how Raven met his lover. The young man sadly asks in response what Yuki will do if he finds out about this story. But Yuki just sighs and says that Raven gave up quickly, so let him tell everything. Raven says he was patrolling the streets and didn't notice anything suspicious at first. Then suddenly he saw a girl in an alley with 3 men standing next to her, who were asking her to go for a walk with them. Raven drew his sword and pointed it confidently at the men. They charged at him, but instead received a blow straight to the stomach. The men were about to flee when one of them shouted that this young man was Raven from the hero's team, and he was also the captain of the Knights. The men were upset because they had missed the surprisingly beautiful girl. After that, they hurriedly ran away. Raven X exclaimed that the men were real barbarians. The girl pulled Raven back and remarked with a smile that he had a very pleasant voice. The young man was surprised, and then hastily covered his mouth with his hands, as if he had suddenly remembered that he wanted to say something. Hapin added that the young man had a very pleasant voice, and confessed that she was terribly jealous of him. Raven asked in surprise what the girl meant. Then the girl thanked the young man for his help, said goodbye to him, and went her way. This was how Raven first met Happiness. He asked if that would be enough for Yuki. As far as Yuki could tell, Raven also wanted happiness. He gets it out of him and says he needs to go outside. On the street, they are met by the Duke, who calls for the captain. She then approached Raven and said that this guy was the one who confessed his feelings for the Happeners. Yuki confirmed her words and added that this girl knew the Happeners. Zook noted that Happiness had a trauma related to men and wondered if Raven could heal her. Yuki noticed that the Duke had replaced humans with men. However, despite Happiness's dislike of humans, this does not apply to Sophia and Cecilia. Raven admitted that she had no idea. The Duke immediately flared up and declared that it would be much cooler if the young man promised to save her. She also called Raven nothing more than a coincidence in her life. The young man became angry and sharply asked the girl what exactly she had said. The Duke was also angry, and Yuki tried with all her might to calm them down, to prevent a quarrel. The Duke says that, for example, they can first befriend the Subordinates, and that's how Raven will be able to help her. Later, Raven and Duke shook hands. The girl wished the young man good luck, and Raven thanked her sincerely in return. Yuki thought that this was how a true, strong friendship was born. After some time, the heroes reached the estate. Japanese was sweeping the yard, busy with her usual chores. A little later, Raven appeared on the territory, and Yuki, meanwhile, watched everything from the side, sincerely wishing the young man good luck. Hapin noticed the young man. Raven was confused, but soon he dared to ask the girl if she would like to be his friend. The girl looked at the young man carefully, and then agreed to be friends with Raven. In the end, everyone was just happy. Then Yuki learned that Cecilia had indirectly influenced Hapeni's decision. And there was also great news. The Duke had joined the Night's Watch under Raven's leadership. That's why Yuki started living with Sheik. The guy kept asking the captain to spend time with him and suggested playing games. After a while, Yuki and Sheik were already sitting in the carriage, and Cecilia was also traveling with them. It was the young man's first time traveling in a carriage, so he could not hide his joy. Sheik happily called the captain to look out the window. Yuki asked Sheik to calm down a bit. The protagonist mentally noted that they were heading to the village of Degest on business. Since Cecilia was a priestess, she needed to help people, so the young man decided to support her. When they got into the carriage, Sheik was already sitting inside. The young man felt sad, thinking that they wanted to leave him behind. Cecilia laughed and said that she was very glad that Yuki and Sheik agreed to go with her, so she was sure that together they would get the job done quickly. Yuki, in response, asked the girl to rely on them. Finally, they reached the village of Degaz. Cecilia told them that their group had been attacked by bandits. Then the headman came out to the group of girls and said in surprise that Cecilia had finally reached them. Looking around, the girl saw that the situation was much worse than she had imagined. She turned to the headman with a request. Could all the wounded be gathered in one place? The elder agrees and looks at Yuki and Shika, wondering who they are. The girl immediately explains that they are her friends who have come to help her. She assures him that they are reliable and can handle everything, so the elder need not worry. The headman bowed low to the boys and asked them to take care of the people. Then he promised to call everyone else. Some time passes. Cecilia helps the wounded, treats their wounds. The young man also uses healing magic, and notices how Cecilia gradually becomes more and more tired. He is a fraud, and if the sheikh uses medicine, that is understandable. But Cecilia heals with magic, and her supplies are not endless. The magic runs out quickly. The young man turns to Cecilia and asks if it is time for her to rest a little. The girl assures him that she is fine, but suddenly faints. The boy is not confused and uses the magic of the holy bell on her. He then turns to the townspeople and apologizes, explaining that Cecilia is completely exhausted and needs to rest. He asks if there is a place nearby where she can lie down. One of the townspeople replies that there is a vacant house nearby. Yuki turns to Shik and says they will finish the conversation later. Some time passes and then Cecilia addresses Yuki. The young man turns around and says they're done. Cecilia smiles a sly smile and notes that the young man understands perfectly well what the girl wants to tell him. Yuki apologizes to the girl for using magic to put her to sleep, but explains that if she hadn't stopped, she might have fainted. He adds that sometimes girls don't realize how much they're overexerting themselves. Cecilia smiled and thanked Yuki for her care and support. Yuki smiled, blushed a little, and thought the girl was incredibly cute. At that moment, several men approached Cecilia and Yuki and told them that a girl named Till lived on the outskirts of the village. They asked if this girl could also look after Till. They report that the girl is not injured, but has been in poor health since birth. Cecilia agrees and asks to be shown the way. The men explain that they must go east of the village. Eventually, Yuki, Shik, and Cecilia reached a small house on the edge of the village. There they were met by a girl who cautiously asked who they were. She was sitting on the bed reading a book, and then she said that Yuki, Shik, and Cecilia were not locals at all. Suddenly she coughed. Cecilia apologized for coming uninvited, but she explained that they had been invited by the village headman himself. Shak approaches the girl and asks her to take her medicine. Yuki reassures Till, saying there's no need to worry. Despite his appearance, Shak is actually very smart. Later, the girl admits that she feels much better. She also says that she was very lucky. When the bandits attacked the village, she was not there. He gives her medicine and advises her to take it for a while longer. Suddenly, Till starts to worry and assures him that the young man is mistaken because she was protected by the village's protector god himself. Yuki asks in surprise which protector god he is talking about. The girl remembers hearing about it from her late grandmother. She often told her stories about him. Now the girl is sure it was he who saved her then. It is said that Tilly brought offerings to the keeper every day, as her grandmother had taught her. On the day the bandits attacked the village, Till was offering a sacrifice to the gods. On the way back, she fell asleep, and because of this, she accidentally avoided meeting the attackers. Shik talks about the extreme drowsiness, and notes that it is the result of dark magic. Yuki assumes it is a nightmare attack, but in reality it is the same spell that causes the terrifying dreams. Cecilia turns to Yuki and notices that this guardian god is making her suspicious. Theor assures her that there is nothing strange about it. Yuki wonders where this guardian god is. Afterwards, they set off straight for the temple of the guardian deity without delay. Teal notes that the statue of the guardian himself is right next door, and if anyone has any doubts, the girl promises to show them everything with her own eyes. Cecilia, Yuki, and Shik stood there, staring at the scene with stony faces. No matter how you looked at it, it really did look like a demon statue. Teal shouts that she won't ask them if they are mocking the guardian god, but suddenly she is overcome by a coughing fit. Cecilia leads her away. Yuki carefully observes everything that is happening, and then turns to Shik. No matter how you say it, this statue does not look like a divine patron at all. Shik in response notes that most likely it is a demon, and that would be more fair to say. Yuki explains, first, such statues are not made for protective deities. Second, this sculpture looks more like a trap from the Demon King's castle, a typical gargoyle. Suddenly, the statue's eyes lit up and it came to life. The demon rushed at Yuki and Shika, and Yuki, without wasting any time, said, "I knew it!" And then he asks, "What kind of god is he if he's really just a demon?" The young man looks up and notices that the sheikh has suddenly disappeared. Suddenly, a young man with a frightening face appeared in front of the demon and kicked the demon hard, right in the head. The demon was defeated, and she rejoiced at his victory. Shik asked Yuki what they were going to do with the demon. Then he looked at the gargoyle and asked if it could talk. The demon got angry and shouted that if they really wanted to kill him, then let them do it. Shik had already drawn his sword and was about to strike, but Yuki stopped him in time. The young man tells the demon that he just wants to talk to him. The gargoyle suspiciously asks if they really came to kill him, to which Yuki replies that it was the demon who attacked them first. Gargoyle bows his head and apologizes for his rudeness, admitting that he shouldn't have acted that way. He notices that he's been recognized and is a little shocked. Yuki also apologizes for his behavior, then wonders why Gargoyle calls himself the Divine Guardian. The demon ponders whether to tell the young men. All this happened hundreds of years ago, when he appeared to protect the temple. However, in those days, he did not do anything every day. He just slept from morning to night. Hearing this, Shik laughed and joked that it reminded him a lot of Captain Yuki. But the gargoyle did not stop and continued. Once, on another ordinary day for him, he was dozing again, not worrying about anything. While he was sleeping, he was quietly carried out of the castle. She couldn't help but laugh, saying it was incredibly funny. As soon as the demon realized this, he jumped out of the cart and almost killed the robbers. Since he had never left his temple, he could not return. He wandered aimlessly until he accidentally came across this village. The bandits who brought him here attacked the locals, and then he decided to punish them. And she kept laughing. When he finally took revenge and his heart was at peace, he settled in this temple, and the villagers themselves began to call him God. Yuki was surprised, because to himself he remained a simple demon. The gargoyle continued to tell how people later came to regard him as a protective god. Among them was a girl who, although weak in body, still came to the temple to clean it. Then he learned that bandits had attacked, and out of gratitude, he hid the girl from them. Yuki asked if he had done something to Till. The demon replied by asking her not to talk nonsense and assuring her that he had done nothing to her. He had only sent her a sleeve of nightmares, but the girl was just sleeping. That was the end of his story, and now he asked me to share stories about the boys themselves. Afterwards, he laughed and remarked that Yuki's situation was even worse than his, because a demon had fallen in love with a human. Yuki said there was nothing funny about it. She began to imitate the demon, pretending to be lost like a little child, but even then she couldn't help but laugh. Then Yuki suggested that they leave it as it was. After that, she wondered if the demon was planning something bad. The gargoyle shook his head and replied that he was not going to do anything to this village, neither to harm nor to help. He had decided to just stay and live in this temple. Hearing this, Yugi just shrugged his shoulders. Then they say, there are no problems. He looks back at Shiki and says that it is time to go back. After a while, Yuki and Shik return to Teal's house. Cecilia carefully put the girl to bed, then turned to Yuki, praised them for a job well done, and asked if they had learned anything new. Yuki asks if Till is really asleep and notes that the guardian god turned out to be a gargoyle. There is a demon in the village, but it does not touch the locals. It has been living peacefully nearby for several hundred years, so Yuki thinks everything will be fine. Cecilia remarks that it's not as simple as it seems. Sheik responds by saying that they're starting to discuss serious matters, so he suggests they get out of here and get something to eat. Yuki hands Shiku the money and says that now they can buy themselves something delicious. Shiku's face instantly lights up with joy. He literally shines with happiness. Seeing him like this, Yuki decides to move on. He suggests leaving this gargoyle for a while longer. The main thing now is to help the locals and deal with the bandits, and the question of the gargoyle can be clarified later. Cecilia agrees. He is right, so the first thing to do is take care of the treatment. Till was sleeping soundly on the bed, and Yuki quietly said that it was time for them to go. But she asked them to do it carefully so as not to wake the girl. They went outside, and Yuki thought it was very romantic to walk under the full moon. Cecilia asked the boy what had happened between them. Yuki, embarrassed, replied that everything was not as it seemed. They continued to move forward through the night forest. The next day, Yuki informed Cecilia and Shika that their new task was to ask the residents about the gargoyle during the treatment. Gathering her thoughts, Cecilia confidently announced the start of treatment. She asked the residents to get in line. The men immediately lined up in front of Cecilia. Yuki immediately understands what these men really want. At that moment, he hears someone thanking Shikaku. He turns around and notices a group of girls gathered around Shake. In that moment, he realizes how much young girls like Shake. But the young man gathered around him only the elderly. They sincerely thanked him for saving them. Yuki wasted no time in asking if they knew anything about the guardian god. The people responded by asking if he meant the demon statue that stood deep in the forest. The protagonist suddenly realized that he had seen this statue before, and remembered how fervently Teal worshipped it. He asked why the girl was clinging to this god so much. He was explained that Till had once cared for this statue, cleaning around it and bringing offerings. But one day, Red Fang attacked her. When Till was only 7 years old, her health was very weak. At a moment when she had almost given up hope, a statue of the protector god came to her aid. However, people don't believe this. Everyone is afraid of this statue and is wary of approaching it. Yuki is surprised by this, but she begins to understand why Teal is so fascinated by this statue. After a while, Cecilia apologized and explained that she had been bombarded with questions herself, so she had never been able to ask them about the gargoyle. Yuki promised to give a real fight to those who insulted the girl. However, the girl stopped him, explaining that nothing terrible had actually happened. It was just that the treatment was a little delayed. After that, she turned to Yuki and asked if he had managed to find out anything. Yuki shares everything he knows with Cecilia. The girl explains that the gargoyle did not attack the locals. The protagonist adds that he understood from the conversations that the people here consider the gargoyle safe. Cecilia says she wants to talk to him, just in case. Yuki understands this and asks Sheik to go visit Till and see her. The young man agrees. After some time, Cecilia and Yuki reach the gargoyle. The demon is angry and asks if they really told anyone about him. Cecilia Bosun said that her name was Cecilia. She appeared in this place because of the attack of bandits on the village. She came to help the inhabitants and cure them. The demon immediately realized that this was the girl that Yuki had told him about. After that, he asked Cecilia what she wanted from him. The girl asked if the demon was really going to attack the village. The demon replied that he had already told the boy. He was not at all interested in attacking this place. He simply lived here. Cecilia realizes that everything is happening exactly as she was told. Then Yuki decides to ask a question. The young man wonders if gargoyles like cute girls. The gargoyle didn't understand what was being said. Yuki guessed that perhaps such a word didn't exist in this world. The gargoyle curiously asked about the meaning of the word. Yuki replied that the word was a remnant of his past life, from the world he once lived in. Later, the gargoyles learned about everything that had happened. The demon shouted indignantly that he would never do such a thing and would not be able to feel feelings for ordinary people. The gargoyle sternly ordered the boy not to look at him that way. He said that if all the conversations were over, he was going to bed. After that, no one dared to reveal his true identity to the girl. After a while, Yuki and Cecilia set off back to the village. On the way, Cecilia asked if this young man had been looking after the young children himself. Yuki smiled and reassured Cecilia, saying that she shouldn't worry, because he only loves her. The girl felt ashamed and asked the young man not to say such things, but Yuki interrupted her and reminded her that it was time for them to return to Shika and Till. After a while, Till asked Sheka to wait a little. The girl was beaming with happiness and confessed that she wanted to tell the boy many interesting things about her divine patron. Sheka was very upset and disappointed. He couldn't even hold back and cried. Till held the boy's hand. Her face lit up with joy, but tears were streaming down her cheeks. She held out his hand to the captain, begging him to save him. Yuki silently watched everything that was happening around her. Till asked Yuki and Cecilia to listen to her stories too. Yuki, scratching his head, apologized to Till and explained that they had to get up early tomorrow, so it was time to go home. Chick yelled at the captain and burst into tears, but the young man calmly told him to come back for dinner. After a while, Yuki and Cecilia were already heading home. The girl asked the boy if Shake would be okay. The young man answered in the affirmative, and then added that Teal would certainly enjoy it. Yuki took Cecilia's hand, where she was holding the crab, and warned her to be careful, as it was already dark. The girl agreed and thanked him. Cecilia looked at Yuki. The boy immediately blushed and looked away. Cecilia just smiled and also felt embarrassed. So they returned home in complete silence, a little confused and embarrassed. The main character was soundly asleep in the guest house when night had long since fallen outside. Suddenly he wakes up and sees the village headman running into the house, begging for help. The headman excitedly reports that bandits have attacked the village. Yuki jumped up from the bed and called out to Shika to get up, but the boy barely opened his eyes and muttered discontentedly that he had just fallen asleep. The clanging of swords echoed throughout the village as the residents engaged in battle with the robbers. Cecilia ran up to the main character. The girl immediately became wary. Yuki called Cecilia and reported that the villagers had already begun to defend themselves, but most of them were wounded, so they couldn't withstand the attack. Then the sleepy sheikh approached Cecilia and Yuki. Yuki asked the boy to pack up, then turned to Cecilia and said that they needed her help. The girl agreed and hurried with the boy. Sheikh nodded slightly, and City immediately moved forward. The young man quickly got up and followed the bandit like a shadow. The man turned sharply and asked angrily who this little guy thought he was. Suddenly, she jumped high up and in the air kicked the robber right in the head. The other men had already noticed him, but didn't have time to say anything. The girl had dealt with almost the entire gang in one fell swoop. Cecilia couldn't believe her eyes. The sheikh turned out to be surprisingly strong. Yuki proudly told how easily he could outsmart his enemies thanks to his agility. The young man added that this boy was his subordinate. The main character also noted that now he too needs to get down to business. Cecilia focused, activating her spells, and confidently promised to help the young man. The main character decided that he could not use magic of great power here. Yuki uses the storm drill spell and pierces the hand of the attacker who was trying to hit the young boy with a sharp whirlwind. Then the main character turned around and noticed smoke rising from Till's house. The protagonist called Sheikh and ordered him to run to Till's house, and they would handle it themselves. The young man nodded, showing that he understood everything, and quickly ran towards Till's house. After a while, the main character breathed a sigh of relief and wiped the sweat from his forehead. The villagers shouted happily. They managed to deal with the bandits. Soon Yuki noticed that Sheik still hadn't returned. The main character was sure that she had finally broken away from the bandits. Cecilia approached the young man, wondering why he was so gloomy. Yuki said that he had a bad feeling. Then he took a sharp step toward Teal's house. Cecilia shouted after him. Yuki ran in the right direction as fast as she could, and saw something that made her freeze in surprise. Till was hugging the wounded gargoyle, and Shik stood in front of them, protecting them from some young man with a sword. The main character's eyes widened in surprise. He tried to ask me what had happened, but I couldn't even utter a word. The unfamiliar man turned to them and asked them condescendingly what was going on. He looked at Yuki and Cecilia, deciding that they were just locals, but suddenly his gaze fell on the girl, and he immediately remembered that he had met her before. Cecilia also recognized this young man. Suddenly, Sheikh rushed towards the stranger with the intention of attacking, but the boy defended himself in time with his sword and asked Sheikh to stop these attempts to attack. At that moment, the stranger abruptly pushed the young man and shouted at him. The chicken flew off its perch and crashed into a tree. The heroes instantly screamed, calling its name. Yuki noticed the angry face, but grabbed him by the shoulder and ordered him to stop. Yuki asked everyone to calm down and asked what had happened. Sheik replied that the gargoyle was protecting Till from robbers, but suddenly he was attacked from behind. The young man asked in surprise what was so wrong with killing demons. He was sure that he had already killed one, and if this young man was responsible for a stranger, then he should show him how to behave. She began to tremble and cry. The young man asked her why she was crying, and if that was the case, he asked her to be quiet. Suddenly, Yuki attacked the young boy. The main character suddenly noticed that his magic disappeared during the attack. This surprised him greatly. Cecilia shouted at Yuki, begging him to stop, as his magic was completely powerless against this young man. Yuki asked Cecilia if she really knew this man. Cecilia replied that this young man was a hero of the Gareth Empire named Mira. His sword had a special property. It absorbed any magic. That was why the young man would not be able to use a magical attack. Yuki immediately fell silent and asked if there were any more heroes besides the ones they already knew about. To this, the girl replied that all of these heroes belonged to different kingdoms. Cecilia replied that other kingdoms also had their heroes, but only they were able to reach the Demon Lord's castle. Yuki wondered if he just didn't know about it. Since the magic absorber was created in the Empire, it is endowed with several unique skills. They also know how to create not only magic swords, but also spears and hammers. At this moment, the boy turned to her and asked if she had spoken for a long time. He brandished his sword and sternly ordered them to end everything immediately. Yuki stopped Mira and asked her to wait, explaining that this gargoyle was only protecting Till. It didn't attack people. The guy asked Yuki what he meant, because he was just exterminating demons. Cecilia turned to Yuki and said that he didn't have the pride that true heroes have. Yuki realized that to become a hero, you need a good reason to fight demons, while Mira noted that taking on guild missions must be a real chore. But in response, he only wanted to end this demon. His face was distorted by a wicked smile. The young man pushes the altar away with a swing, but the girl clings to his leg and does not allow him to do this, trying to protect her protector god. The young man replied that Till was bothering him, so he was ready to kill her too. Then Cecilia stopped him and asked him to wait. She reminded him that he was a hero of the Gareth Empire, and was he really going to raise his hand against the inhabitants of the Kingdom of Clarence? The young man smiled and replied that he really didn't know, but if he wanted to, he would definitely raise his hand. He confidently pointed his sword straight at Cecilia and asked if the daughter of the Akuran family would really dare to stand against him. Yuki took Cecilia by the shoulder and pulled her aside. The girl looked back and called Yuki's name. The young man looks at Yuki and asks if he really wants to fight him. Smiling, he mockingly calls him a simpleton. Yuki looks intently at the young man, then at Mr. Gargoyle. He notes to himself how horrible Gargoyle looks now. His wings and arms have been cut off. He looked at the crying boy, who was sobbing as bitterly as the girl. For these actions, and for threatening Cecilia with a sword, the hero would never be able to forgive this young man. He orders him to prepare because now he will show what real hell is. Yuki Vin summons her magic, but the young man only laughs and assures her that it is useless. Her spells will not work on him. The next moment, he holds out a sword in front of him and absorbs all of Yuki's magic from it. Grint, the main character, explained that he had only greeted the young man, but when he tried to use another spell, all the magic was instantly absorbed by the boy's sword. He smiled and reminded himself that he had already said that Yuki's magic was completely useless. Then he asked if Yuki would use any weapons, but the main character just smiled and replied that, unfortunately, he could only use magic. The boy swung his sword and boldly said that this was how Yuki would lose to him. At that moment, sharp blades flew out of the blade and flew straight at Cecilia and Yuki. The protagonist was not confused. He quickly used magic to protect Cecilia. He thought that he was actually happy for his beloved's concern, but if he wasted a little more time, Cecilia and the others might be in danger. Then he releases even more magical power and asks the young man if he can handle such power. The young man extends his sword forward and tenses, gritting his teeth. He notices that the magic here is simply incredible, and because of this power, his sword begins to crack. Suddenly, Yuki appears in front of him and punches the guy. Yuki laughs and says that he got caught. The young man loses consciousness, and Yuki smiles and says that he shouldn't have angered such a powerful him. Cecilia enthusiastically says that Yuki is incredible, then wonders if he really needed to be in this situation. Yuki responds by admitting that when something switches inside him, he becomes completely different. After that, he looked at the lying sheik and expressed hope that everything was okay with him. Cecilia reassured him that the injuries were not serious and he would recover in 2 or 3 days. Then the young man who had recently defeated Yuki finally regained his composure and threw his sword with all his strength straight at the gargoyle. Yuki noticed it too, but it was too late. The blade rushed straight at the gargoyle's head, but at that moment Till stood in front of the demon, covering him from the blow. The blade pierced Till's body, and she began to fall, losing consciousness. Yuki managed to catch her and tried to remove the blade from her body. He realized with horror that everything was going wrong and that he could not save her. Cecilia rushed after Yuki without a second's hesitation. She immediately used healing magic. The gargoyle turned to the girl and asked why she had done this and sacrificed herself. Tal replied that the demon had saved her so many times, so this time she wanted to thank him. Tal's strength was almost running out. At that moment the young man stood up and noticed that Till had interrupted him again. He could not even imagine that the magic absorber would ever break. He smiled and said that everything was fun today, so this time he would forgive them everything. Yuki looked at him and wondered if he really thought he could escape so easily. The young man laughed and told Yuki not to be foolish. Then he created a bow from the wind and shot arrows straight into the sky. Thus the young man used his skill, a hail of arrows. Yuki realized that things were bad, so he used magic to destroy all the arrows that were still left. Yuki looked around but saw no one. He followed the young man. He apologized to Cecilia, admitting his guilt and admitting that he had been too rude. The girl looked at Yuki and said with a smile that there was no point in apologizing, since she herself had been unable to do anything. Yuki gritted his teeth, feeling that he was terrible. He had been given a perfect body and inexhaustible magical power, his special advantages. He had always believed that thanks to these cheats, he could do anything. In this world, he realized that he wasn't as strong as he had imagined. He looked intently at the gargoyle, Shika, and Cecilia, waiting to see what would happen next. After that, Yuki turned to Cecilia and asked if the locals really shouldn't come here. The girl thought for a moment, then replied that she didn't think they would come here. At that moment, wings grew from Yuki's back and a horn appeared on his head. Cecilia was frightened to see Yuki changing and starting to resemble a demon. He said he would overtake this world and destroy it. The girl shuddered in horror. But then Yuki smiled gently and reassured her, saying that she shouldn't worry. He would only hurt him a little. The girl looked uncertainly at the young man who had asked her to take care of Till while he was gone. And then Cecilia just silently watched Yuki's silhouette recede into the sky. The young man was chasing the world until he suddenly threw a scarf around his neck and decided it was a great idea. Then Yuki spots his target wandering through the trees. He lands softly on the ground, and at that moment Mira turns around sharply. He instantly calms down, wondering where another demon came from. And suddenly he notices that Yuki has disappeared from his sight. Mary couldn't figure out where the demon had gone until she saw its head pressed to the ground near the Yuki River. Then Yuki jumped back, and Mira asked what he wanted. Yuki looked at the young man with a wicked look and wondered if he was really the one who cut off the arms and wings of his subordinates. He became angry and declared that for such an act against his faithful servant, the young man deserved only death. Mira laughed and admitted that the task was not easy. All that was needed was to kill the demon. With these words, he lunged straight at Yuki, but he remained motionless until the very last moment. Mira shouted at him to die. Yuki opened his eyes, and at the same moment he hit Mira sharply. Mira flew to the side, punching through the trees with his body. The young man cleared his throat and asked, "If the Demon King has already been destroyed, why are there still such powerful demons in the world?" At that moment, Yuki approached him and said that he was very weak. The protagonist feels that now he is no longer an ordinary person, now he is a dangerous demon. Mira grabs the dagger and attacks the demon with determination, delivering blows one after another. You manage to anticipate his attack and deftly dodge to the side, wondering if this young man really intended to kill him with such frenzy. Yuki grabbed the young man's hand, and he immediately realized that it was useless to resist. Then the main character used fire magic and hit the mirror with all his strength so that it finally lost all its power. Yuki grabbed the young man by the collar and flew with him into the sky. Mira asked where the demon was taking the boy, but Yuki only replied that he did not deserve to die at his hands. They reached a river with a raging current. Mira exclaimed that this could not be. He shouted that he would certainly punish that damn demon. However, Yuki let go of his hand, and Mura, unable to hold back, began to fall rapidly into the depths of the water. Yuki believed that this river led to the Geras Empire, so if the boy was lucky, he would be able to return home. After that, Yuki's sinister form dissolves, and he returns to his normal appearance. The young man says that it is time to return to Cecilia. He understands that he cannot remain in this form, and now he faces a difficult task, to get rid of the stone and wings, although it will be very painful. After Yuki threw Mira into the river, he returned to Sicily. The girl was very worried about the young man, and even more worried about his demonic appearance. The young man does not want to remain in this form, because now he lives under the name Yuki. Till survived the next day and was healed by magic. Or maybe it was because the gargoyle was always there, holding his hand. After the defeat, the sheikh felt very depressed. Yuki hopes that when they return, the Duke, Happens, and Cecilia will support him. It is also the day of farewell to the village. They have to say goodbye to Till and everyone else who remains here. Suddenly, a scream is heard from Till's house. Yuki bursts in and loudly shouts the girl's name. Till woke up, filled with joy that a divine guardian had come to her home. She immediately began to talk about the mess and dirt in her house, feeling embarrassed. After apologizing, Till was about to leave, but the gargoyle stopped her, calmly advising her to return to bed, since she was not yet healed. Cecilia and Yuki watched from the sidelines. Meanwhile, the gargoyle ordered Till to immediately lie down on the ground. Then he turned to Cecilia and Yuki for help, because if this continued, the girl would get even worse. Till turned to the guardian god and humbly expressed her request. She asked that he address her by her name, simply Till. The gargoyle agrees, and for the first time addresses the girl by name, after which he advises her to lie down and rest until she feels better. The girl literally shines with happiness. She screams with delight, because the gargoyle has finally called her by name. At that moment, she felt like she could die of joy. After a while, Tilla apologized to everyone for her behavior, as Yuki and Cecilia even came to her house. Cecilia replied that nothing bad had happened and everything was fine. Phil, relieved, says it's a good thing they came because she wanted to talk to them. Yuki doesn't hide her curiosity and asks what exactly they're talking about. Phil then turns to Yuki and Cecilia with a request. Can they take her and her guardian god with them to Manurva? The gargoyle was incredibly surprised by the girl's request. The girl bowed low and apologized again. She explained that even the best healing magic would not save the guardian god, but perhaps help could be found in Manurva. Yuki thought it would be easy to find out everything about Manurva. He inquires about Cecilia's opinion, asking what she thinks about it. The girl admits that, to be honest, it's impossible. Till hasn't fully recovered yet, and getting the gargoyle into the city will be extremely difficult. But Yuki tells Cecilia that he already has an idea. After a while, Yuki shares his plan with everyone. Cecilia carefully considers what he said, and adds that if they think it through carefully, maybe everything will turn out for the best. Yuki assured him that everything was fine. Teal was so happy that he hugged the gargoyle and exclaimed that everything was so beautiful. However, the gargoyle himself asked everyone to wait with their conclusions, because he had not yet given his consent. The demon, a little embarrassed, nevertheless agreed, and Yuki and Cecilia, who were watching from the sidelines, quietly exchanged words that the gargoyle could never refuse Till. After finishing all the work, Cecilia, Till, and Shake left the village. They had spent almost a week here, so they were a little sad to part with this place. Then Cecilia noticed Yuki, who was loading the statue onto the van. She decided to ask the guy what kind of statue it was, and in response she heard it was a gargoyle. With the help of magic, he transformed the gargoyle into a statue. In the meantime, Till was treated, and the girl was supposed to work and live on the family estate of Aquaran. Celia only asked her not to overexert herself, but Till happily replied that cleaning was a normal thing for her. Yuki returned to Celia and expressed his desire to keep the statue on their estate, but she immediately refused. She explained to Yuki that if he wanted to keep the statue, it had to be really beautiful. Then Yuki realized that that was exactly what he thought. But Teal would never beg for a gargoyle. That was why the boy left the statue at home. Some time passed, when suddenly the Duke kicked down the door, and, together with the S, burst into the room where Yuki was standing next to him. Both girls were calling for the captain. When the Duke entered the room, he asked the young man, "Where is the villain who has upset her so much?" Yuki was frightened when he saw the girl's unexpected appearance. They stood opposite, radiating menace. The Duke declared that they would not just kill this man, but would do it with particular cruelty. Yuki raised his hands in front of him, asking the girls to wait a moment. Then he asked who exactly told them about this. They were united by the desire to celebrate Shake's return, but when everyone gathered, he was very upset and told them everything that had happened. Yuki asked everyone to calm down, assuring them that he had already resolved the situation. He had broken several bones and thrown the culprits into the river. The Duke told the captain that his punishment was too lenient. According to the Duke, the man should have had all his bones broken and then been thrown into the sea. Happens added that the man should have been crushed. At that moment, Yuki mentally begged the girls not to say such cruel things. He waved it off, saying he had already taught him a lesson. Then the young man asked about the girl's job. The Duke assured him that they would be leaving for a short while, and Yuki exclaimed in surprise, asking if they were really going to quit their jobs. The Duke objected to the captain and noticed that she was very worried about this. Yuki understood that no matter how much she tried to explain something to him, it still wouldn't help. Then he assured her that Cecilia would definitely be able to do something. She would easily calm him down, and she would definitely not abandon him if she noticed that he was in a depressed state. The Duke confirmed this. Yuki asked to believe Cecilia, and Japinas supported his words. Then the Duke turned the conversation to the captain, and the girl, eager to know what was being said, pointed her finger at the statue. She admitted that, to be honest, the statue looked very creepy and did not fit in this room at all. The Duke responded by suggesting that they simply get rid of it and, smiling, called the statue nothing more than a pile of junk. At that moment, the gargoyle heard everything that was happening. He was shaking with rage, and suddenly he appeared in his true form, although he admitted that he did not like this form either. The Duchess instantly drew her sword, and Happens began to whisper a spell. But Yuki shouted for everyone to stop immediately and stop arguing. If something breaks here, who will pay for the damage? After some time, Yuki and Gargoyle had time to discuss everything in the world. The Duke understood what had happened and sincerely apologized to Gargoyle for pulling out his sword. Then she introduced herself, explained that she was a dual hem, and that Happy Nose was a harpy. Gargoyle admitted that he didn't have a name, but was very happy to meet the girls. The Duke complained a little, saying that it was awkward to address someone who didn't have a name. Then Happini suggested giving him a name, Gaius. The Duke said that the name sounded brave and very cool. Gargoyle replied that they could call him whatever they wanted. Yuki thought that they had become friends so quickly, and that was really good. Duke asked Guy if the captain had really done that to him. He was shocked, and added that it was simply horrible and in no taste at all. Guy agreed. He thought so too, but there was nothing he could do. Yuki was about to get annoyed and asked the boys to stop, but suddenly he heard a knock on the door. Turning around instantly, he used magic against Guy. Sophia came into the room. The girl said that happenings had indeed arrived. She had instructed her to take care of the new one yesterday. The girl looked sternly at Geppings and said that she should not waste her time on entertainment. She was frightened. At that moment, Sophia decisively pulled Geppings after her, and the girl began to beg the boss to forgive her. Sophia turned to Yuki, apologized for her intrusion, and cautiously asked about the statue. Suddenly, Raven appeared behind Sophia. He turned to the Duke, telling him that he was going to the village of Degas today to catch the robbers, so he would wait for the Duke there. Raven also approached Yuki, inviting him to join their mission if there was time. Yuki agreed and waved a welcoming hand to the young man. Then Sophia turned to them and said that she didn't need this statue at all, so it was better to just throw it away. Guy looked back at the young man and asked what he had turned him into this time. Yuki simply smiled in response and said that he thought the Sphinx was a great idea. He suddenly realizes that he has been reborn in this world, and now the beauty around him feels completely different. After that, he tells Guy that he is going to go to the guild, because he hasn't been there in a long time. Guy shouts after him, asking if he is really going to leave him so easily. Some time passes, and Yuki finally arrives at the Adventurers Guild, but he doesn't find Clem there. A little confused, he turns to the receptionist. The girl recognizes the main character and says that he is the one who often talks to the vice master of the guild. Yuki doesn't understand who she is talking about, so he asks the girl who exactly she means. Yuki paused in confusion when the girl repeated again. This young man often communicates with Kleiman, a master with extraordinary abilities. The girl asked anxiously if the young man was okay. He replied that he was fine and hurried to apologize. He just said that he didn't think Kleiman looked like a deputy guildmaster at all. The receptionist laughed and replied that she understood this young man perfectly, even though he expressed himself that way, but still Kleiman always does his job flawlessly. When she joked about giving the entire guild a day off on the day of the hero parade, he was so taken with the idea that he worked for them for 3 days straight. It was when Yuki first showed up in town that he realized why. Yuki asked the girl what happened with today's quest. She whispered in response that it somehow concerned the guild's honor, so she couldn't tell him about it out loud. She heard the news and apparently had a fight with his wife. Her husband had been in the hospital for a month. Yuki was very surprised. Later, Clemen, sitting on his hospital bed, asked Yuki why he had come. In response, Yuki handed him a bag of goodies and reminded him that Clemen had ended up here because of their argument. He asked what exactly he had done wrong. Clemen explained that the argument was over their wedding anniversary. Yuki nodded in response. He immediately got the point and assumed that Kleiman had simply forgotten about the date. The man got angry and said that he remembered her well. Just buying a gift was such a hassle for him that he kept putting it off until later. On the anniversary day, he ran around looking for a gift until night fell. When he finally returned home, her face was terribly stern. Yuki loudly declared that it was all Clemen's fault and that he should apologize to his wife immediately. But Clemens replied that she was no longer angry and promised to come home as soon as he finished work. After that, he turned to Grind and asked curiously if the young man was really jealous because his wife was so worried about him. Yuki was silent for a moment, and then he remembered Celia's words. During one quarrel, Sophia's husband had only fully recovered after 6 months. Then Yuki asked Clamon what his wife did for a living. The man replied that she worked as a maid at the estate, and even held the position of head maid. Yuki asked if Kleiman's wife's name was really Sophia. The man was surprised that Yuki knew anything about her. Then the young man explained that he knew a girl from the Aquarine family, and it was she who introduced him to the maids. Yuki asked how Clemens met Sophia. The man immediately smiled and asked why the young man was so interested in their love story. And then he agreed to share his memories. To begin with, Clemens said that since childhood he had been considered a real genius. Until he was 18, he was a lonely traveler of the highest rank. Everything seemed to come to him effortlessly, and life turned into sheer boredom. Then he heard the voice of a girl who reached out her hand to him and said that it seemed he was free now. It was Sophia. She noted that the young man looked very strong and invited him to join their team. Meanwhile, Clem thought that this girl was extremely beautiful. He was drunk and immediately started hugging everyone around him, but before he could even blink an eye, Sophia gave him a good beating. It was incredible to realize that this girl had defeated him so easily. After that, he offered to join her team, and together they became incredibly strong. Kleiman said that the couple was nicknamed Invincible and Indifferent. Yuki thought it was a rather strange name. However, the man explained that this was what people themselves called them. At first, they did not confess their feelings to each other, but over time, their hearts gradually ignited with love. When they were together, Sophia looked incredibly beautiful. For the first time in his life, the man began to feel real joy, and then he decided to propose to her. They had dinner at a restaurant, and then Kleiman took out his engagement ring and asked the girl if she would marry him. The proposal was perfect, so Sophia happily agreed. However, after her husband's next words, she couldn't hold back and gave him a beating. After that, he underwent treatment for another 6 months. The plaintiff said that Sophia had asked to work as an adventurer. The girl was very eager to continue this business. However, the plaintiff was concerned for her safety and did not want her to take any risks. He tried to convince her to refuse, even after she had defeated him, but in the end the girl agreed. Yuki tells him that she and Kleiman are now married and living happily together. Kleiman is happy and enthusiastically supports her words. But suddenly the door of the ward opens, and Sophia enters the room. She gently addresses Kleiman and says that she came specifically for him. Sophia notices Yuki and asks what he's doing here. The young man replies with a smile that he met Kleiman at the guild, so he decided to visit and see how he's doing. The man was beaming with happiness because his beloved wife had come to find out how he was doing. Sophia kicked the man in the head and asked which lover he was talking about. Kleim supported his head, and Sophia noticed that this man always addressed her by her first name. Makshina claimed that he had managed to look up the girl's skirt. She just nodded in agreement with what he had said. Yuki was surprised to hear this, but Sophia turned to him and calmly explained. Kleiman was her husband, so everything was fine. After that, she helps her husband to his feet. The girl bows, turns to Yuki, and says that they are leaving, and thanks him for visiting her husband. After some time, the boy returned home and remembered watching the lovebirds, and felt a strong jealousy. Hugging his pillow, he thought about how much he wanted to see Cecilia. The next day, Yuki was lying in bed, completely exhausted. Guy, who had taken the form of a sphinx statue, turned to him and asked him to finally stop, because it was starting to annoy him. Yuki turns to Guy, and Guy advises the guy, if you really want to see a girl, just go to her yourself. The young man really wants to approach the girl, but something invisible is holding him back. He can't do it. Cecilia's job turned out to be more complicated than the young man had imagined, so he couldn't just walk up to her. Meanwhile, the boy was using magic, but then the man asked him to stop. But even so, Yuki was able to create a real work of art from this gargoyle. He was pleased because the statue turned out surprisingly well. Meanwhile, Guy wondered if the young man was mocking him. Then there was a knock on the young man's door. It was Cecilia, who asked if he was home. Yuki was very surprised to hear the girl's familiar voice. He called out that he was home and asked to wait a moment. Then he noticed Cecilia and everything that was happening behind her. The girl was sincerely happy to see the young man. Yuki was overjoyed to see Cecilia, but he immediately noticed that Happens had come with her. The girl wondered why the boy was looking at her so intently. Cecilia began to apologize for the unexpected visit and asked if they were bothering Yuki. The young man calmly replied that no one was bothering him. Cecilia had come to him herself, so today promises to be simply wonderful. The girls enter the boy's room. The girls went into Yuki's room. Mary Kinnis immediately began to look around with curiosity. Yuki could not understand why her friend was behaving so strangely. But suddenly Mary Kinnis asked, "Where did the gargoyle disappear to?" Yuki pointed to the statue that was part of the artwork and said that this is where it all happened. Happy narrowed her eyes and told Yuki that it was just awful. But the boy couldn't understand why the girl didn't appreciate his efforts. The young man asked Cecilia what she thought, and the girl was confused. And when Yuki assured her that in his opinion everything turned out just fine, Cecilia replied that this statue seemed quite unusual to her. At first, Yuki thought everyone liked it, but then he realized that art is not an easy thing to do, and he was misunderstood again. Yuki decided to change the subject and asked why these two girls were together today. Cecilia replied that it was their day off, so they decided to take a walk around the city. She asked if Yuki and Guy would mind, but the young man reassured her that everything was fine. Cecilia continued her story and said that she had been spending most of her time at their estate lately. She asked if he was okay. Then the girl sat down on the bed right next to Yuki. The main character noted that Cecilia had already noticed everything anyway, and then added that they owed everyone so much. Yuki began to worry if she had done something wrong, but Cecilia assured her that everything was fine. At this moment, the mother called the young man to her, or perhaps to her husband. Then Cecilia got confused and asked if this was a kidnapping, but Yuki just laughed and said that it was Cecilia, and besides, they were neighbors, so there was nothing wrong with it. Yuki asked if Sheik had recovered, but Cecilia awkwardly apologized, explaining that she had been busy lately and was hardly ever home, so she didn't know anything. Here, their conversation was interrupted by Happiness, who confidently promised to tell them everything that was needed. It seems that Celia noticed that the Sheik had changed a lot. As soon as she arrived at the estate, she immediately asked him, "What happened to you?" She was extremely talented and had never been defeated before. However, after his first defeat, he was confused and didn't know what to do next, so everything became difficult and unbearable for him. At that moment, Celia hugged him while he spoke out everything that was accumulated in his heart. He cried himself to sleep, and then he started staying overnight at the estate. Since then, he seems to have even felt much better. Cecilia smiled and said that her mother was just wonderful. She also works as a healer, so Cecilia respects her a lot. Yuki smiled back and wondered how Cecilia managed to heal Sheki's heart. A happy Nace added that Cecilia was able to heal that girl's heart. Yuki remarked that she should have said that earlier, but she shouldn't have said that because it made her sound like she was some kind of kidnapper. Yuki admitted that he would like to talk to Cecilia about Sheik. The girl was surprised by this statement. He noted that Cecilia had recently become much closer to her mother. However, he was sure that everything would go well, and that Celia would cope with this role. Cecilia smiled and supported the young man's words. Then the boy suddenly changed the subject and announced that his friend had been discharged from the hospital yesterday. As it turned out, he was the husband of Sophia, the head maid at the estate where Cecilia lived. Both the girl and Yuki were genuinely surprised by this news. Yuki clenched her fist and thought to herself, "This man is married now. She is madly jealous of him, because he is now happy and enjoying life." Smiling, Cecilia noted that she had also heard rumors about Sophia visiting her husband. First, he was put in the hospital because she beat him up real bad. Sophia said she spent her anniversary alone, but at least he got paid for it. Cecilia turned to Geponesa and asked if the girl had seen the head maid today. Geponesa nodded and admitted that it was very scary. She starts to tremble and says that Sophia was smiling. The young man thought that the girl must have felt good, but what was it about Sophia's smile that scared Happy Nace so much? Yuki said he didn't want to hear any more stories about Clement and Sophia's love. He was much more interested in how they had once been adventurers together. Then Cecilia remembered what her mother had told her about those times, and Yuki immediately asked her to share the details of that story. Cecilia told how it all started. This was before Sophia and Clement became a couple. Sophia was always uncomfortable forming teams. She had already participated in various teams, but none of them were perfect for her. The participants often argued with her and disbanded the groups for the slightest reason. Together with her team, Sophia performed dangerous tasks, which often resulted in serious injuries to her comrades. She constantly felt guilty about this. However, only Clement constantly complained about something, but never once moved away from her even a step. Once the girl said that if everything around him annoyed him, they could disband the team. Clement was stunned, but immediately explained. He didn't like the task itself, but Sophia didn't annoy him at all, so he wasn't going to disband the team. It seems that it was from that moment that Sophia fell in love with Clement. Yuki grabbed her head and joked that it was already like a real romantic story. Cecilia couldn't help but laugh softly. Then Sophia remembered another detail. While Mr. Clement remained in his place, other men began to pick on her, because the girl was very cute and attracted attention. Suddenly, Clement interrupted their conversation and asked what to do next. He scratched the back of his head and noticed that other boys seemed to be flocking to the girl. He called Sophia, inviting her to go to another bar because he could no longer change anything. But suddenly a man stopped him and shouted loudly for Clement not to ignore him. Clement apologized to him, then sat the man down next to him and calmly told him that it was time to stop. The stranger put his hand on the girl's shoulder, but Sophia instantly turned around and kicked him hard. The man flew across the entire bar and crashed into the wall. Everyone in the room froze in shock, realizing what this couple was capable of. Since then, the couple has been called unbreakable. When they went to another bar, Kleiman admitted that the day had been difficult, but the happy moments with Sophia were priceless to him. Yuki grabbed his head again, muttering that it was those annoying love stories again. Cecilia laughed awkwardly in response. The girl noticed that Happy was completely asleep. The boy looked at the sleeping girl and wondered how she had managed to climb onto the bed so quietly. Cecilia said that it was probably time to go. After that, she gently woke Happy up. Cecilia announced that they were leaving, and added that the young man would definitely not refuse to accompany her to Clarence Castle. Yuki wondered in surprise what this meant, but Cecilia only said that she trusted the boy, and said goodbye to him. A few days later, the main character finally got to go to the castle. He was genuinely surprised to see how huge the castle turned out to be. Yuki asked why they had been invited to this castle. Cecilia replied that she would tell them everything now. Yuki looked at his happy face, and thought that his old temper had returned. Cecilia said that the three of them had been to Degas village. Yuki confirmed that it had. The girl added that she had already reported it to Clarence Castle. There's nothing wrong with taming the bandits and helping the villagers. She didn't say anything about any men, so that question is out of the question. Yuki guesses that the reason must lie in that terrible story about the hero from another country. Yuki noticed Shik's anxiety, so he carefully placed his hand on his head, trying to calm him down somehow. Shik smiled in response and assured him that everything was fine. He was feeling better. He mentally decided that he would definitely become even stronger and would never let anyone defeat him again. Besides, he promised Cecilia that once he became stronger, he would definitely defeat this hero with all his might. Cecilia giggled, and Yuki smiled awkwardly and pondered the strange expression on the young man's face. Cecilia exhaled and confirmed. Just like Yuki had said, it was a hero from the Garrus Empire. He was actually roaming around their kingdom. But that wasn't the main problem. The real issue was how they managed to defeat him. According to the official version, they used various weapons, cornered him, and then threw him into the river. The girl gives Yuki the report so he can read it himself. In addition, the report mentions a sword that absorbs magic, so it was immediately clear that the girl would not be able to defeat him alone. It seems that something was suspected, which is why they were summoned to the castle. Yuki says that they think it's best to just keep quiet for now. But the main problem right now is the young man she and Cecilia have spoken out against. Shik stood there, staring in disbelief, not understanding why the two were watching him so intently. Cecilia turned to Shik anxiously and asked him to be careful. Yuki sternly ordered him to listen carefully and not do anything unnecessary. Shik nodded seriously, making it clear that he understood everything. Some time passed and the three friends finally reached the royal castle, where a man was already waiting for them, who introduced himself as Prince Clarence Alter. It turned out that he was the current king of Clarence. Yuki, Shik, and Cecilia knelt before the king. The man laughed and said that they were being too formal. Couldn't they just talk in a simple way? The girl who was standing next to the king remarked that it was not fitting for him to behave like that, for he was a king and should behave accordingly. Her name was Sylvia. The prince, smiling cheerfully, asked her not to be so serious. Yuki recalls hearing that the third prince, thanks to his talent, had achieved significant military victories in just 15 years. And at 25, he had ascended the royal throne. The young man understood that he was dealing with a young man, but he still imagined him to be completely different. Cecilia's face was so indifferent, as if she had long been used to this kind of thing, that the boy decided that it was a normal thing for her. Looking at Shika, Yuki noticed that he had already fallen asleep. Sylvia turned to the king and announced that they could continue their audience. The prince laughed and apologized to the girl for briefly plunging into their little world together. The king addressed Yuki, Shika, and Cecilia, explaining that he had summoned them here because of the events that had occurred in the village of Dagest. The content of the report is fine, but something is troubling him. He turns to Cecilia Aquarin of the heroic squad, even though she is nearby. But will their team really be able to stand up to the hero of the Hera's empire? He notes that Yuki, who accompanied the girl, is just an ordinary adventurer of a certain rank, and nothing is known about this guy at all. At this time, Yuki was trying to wake up Sheikah. The king declares that he wants to see what the young man is capable of. He asks if she would mind if he competed with Sylvia right now. Suddenly, the young man picks himself up and replies that he has no objection. Sylvia menacingly draws her sword and suggests they begin immediately. She makes a sharp horizontal swing, but her opponent deftly jumps to the side and avoids the blow. The king only smiles, nodding in satisfaction. That's very good. Then the girl swings again, but this time she jumps up and twists in the air. During the next attack, she lowers the sword from top to bottom, but the young man also twists in the air several times and deftly bounces away from the girl. The girl puts away her sword, then says with a smile that Sheik moves deftly and is extremely capable for his age. The king agrees with her and says that he trusts Cecilia, Sheik, and Yuki. Cecilia is very worried and thanks the king, but he only laughs and asks the girl not to be nervous because he knew about everything from the very beginning. The knights told him everything that had happened and once again carefully examined the battlefield. However, if they had lost, they would hardly have appeared here on their own 2 feet. He simply decided to joke with them a little. Cecilia was trembling with shame and insult, and her husband asked her not to be angry. He said that the boys had done well in the village, so now it was time to reward them for their efforts. That was why he had invited them here. Yuki wondered what reward to choose. The word seemed surprisingly warm to him. He thought the reward was truly wonderful, and he imagined Cecilia in his mind. He was lost in his daydreams and accidentally said out loud that he wanted Cecilia to be his girlfriend. Cecilia herself was shocked by what she heard from Yuki. Only then did the main character realize that he had said it out loud. The news that Yuki had proposed to Cecilia as his girlfriend spread throughout the castle in an instant. Darts, Sylvia, and Sheik looked at Yuki in genuine surprise. The young man suddenly realized that he had accidentally voiced his thoughts. Now he wondered how Cecilia would react to this. The protagonist turns to the girl and notices her face freeze in surprise. But suddenly she closes her eyes, and when she opens them, she looks at Yuki so sternly that the boy's heart goes cold. He realizes that this seems to be the end for him. Suddenly, Sylvia screamed, accusing Yuki of being a real scoundrel. She indignantly reminded him that His Highness had allowed him to choose the reward, and this young man had dared to ask for such shameful things. Yuki jumped at the girl's unexpected cry. He was confused and didn't know what to do next, so he looked at Sheik, who was laughing loudly, holding his stomach, and then looked at Cecilia, who had covered her face with her hands. But suddenly Yuki heard laughter from the side. The king asked if this whole situation seemed quite interesting. The young man didn't quite understand what the king was talking about, but he assumed it meant he had been saved. Cecilia turned to the boy and warned him that when they returned, he would face the consequences. Yuki thought he hadn't been saved after all. The king laughed and remarked that Cecilia and Yuki seemed to be getting along very well. Yuki asked curiously if it was really that noticeable from the outside. The king was about to move on to talk about the reward for the young man, but Yuki interrupted him. Interrupting him, he asked the man to just forget what he had said, explaining that he had gotten excited and unknowingly blurted out something he shouldn't have said. The main character was so impressed that he was at a loss. The king was surprised and said that he had no idea that such an interesting person existed in his kingdom. If he had met him earlier, he would have definitely taken him into the hero group. However, Yuki pointed out that that would be too much, since he himself belongs to the same rank. The king then turned to Yuki to express his opinion on his request. He apologized and explained that he could not ignore the Aquaran's views. Yuki noticed that the king was feeling guilty. He asked the ruler not to worry about it. And then Cecilia thought in surprise that she would never have expected to hear such a thing from the king himself. Then the man turns to Cecilia Aquarine and asks what reward this girl would like to receive. But Cecilia replies that she does not need anything. The very opportunity to serve the kingdom is already the greatest reward for her. The man enthusiastically remarked that the girl's devotion to the kingdom was truly impressive. He was sure that their choice to take her and the heroes on their team was absolutely correct. After that, he asked if the other members of the group were okay, if they were healthy. Cecilia confirmed this and said that everyone had already returned to their normal lives. According to her, Yuga was currently involved in international affairs and also helping to destroy Class A monsters. Makana also earned the honorary title of Court Witch, and Raven became the captain of the knights defending the castle. Cecilia became a traveling priestess to help those in need. Although each of them has chosen their own path, they are all united by a common desire. The king expresses his hope that they will continue to serve the country for the good. The girl agrees. Then the man suddenly remembers another thing. He turns to the sheik and asks what award he would like to receive. The young man thought for a while, and then said that he would like to receive a lot of sweets. Some time passes and Yuki, Cecilia, and Sheik return home. Yuki notices how happy the boy looks. The main character thought he had been summoned to the castle only to be let go with a basket of sweets. Fortunately, the Darts King turned out to be a very open person. He even said that if there was a desire and time, he could safely come again. However, this young man behaves even more shamefully. At this moment, Cecilia calls him and asks to talk, inviting him to visit her. Yuki trembled and agreed. Sheik said goodbye to the girl who lived inside Yuki and said he would go share the sweets with the others. The main character thought that being alone with a girl in her room was an incredible feeling. At such moments, the guy cannot find a place to rest from excitement. But now everything was completely different because Cecilia looked truly scary. The girl approaches Yuki and asks if he has anything to say. The young man immediately falls to his knees in front of her and says that he has a confession to make. He sincerely apologizes to the girl. Cecilia looks at the boy and asks what exactly he is apologizing for and what is on his mind. Yuki replies that he confessed his feelings to her right in front of everyone. It was terribly awkward. The girl completely agrees with the guy. She asked him not to think that she hated him, but talking about such things in public was truly something terrible. Yuki is genuinely surprised to see that the girl is actually crying, and guiltily apologizes to her. Then he remembers that just the thought of the award made his head spin at that moment. Cecilia says there is something else important to talk about. The young man agrees. Suddenly, Celia entered the room and asked Cecilia if she had returned yet. Seeing the strange scene, the woman anxiously asked Yuki and Cecilia what was going on. The girl told her mother the whole truth. The woman realized that Yuki had done something very wrong. She wondered if it was even possible to confess one's feelings in such a situation. After all, there was absolutely no appropriate atmosphere for this. Cecilia explained to her mother that she didn't quite understand. The woman asked if Yuki knew how important it was to choose the right time and place for something like this. She shouted, asking if the young man understood that with such indifference he could easily lose Cecilia. Someone else would take her for themselves. She asked if it was normal for him to perceive the situation this way. Yuki shouted in response that he would never allow this. He can't stand the thought of Cecilia marrying someone else. If that happens, he's even ready to turn to the power of a demon. Celia laughed and asked if the young man was really thinking about how to defeat his opponent. He immediately began to deny everything. The woman noted that it was good to react that way, but Cecilia added that it was completely useless. The woman replied that all this only confirmed the sincerity of the young man's feelings. Yuki scratched the back of his head and added that even that was not enough. Cecilia noted that she suspected that the boy was up to something strange, but Yuki denied everything. Celia laughed happily and remarked that Yuki and Cecilia looked very pretty together. Her words immediately brought a slight blush to their cheeks. The woman thought that from the outside it looked like Yuki was really serious about Cecilia. She thinks they would make a great couple. Yuki asked Cecilia to be more careful now. Cecilia sighed and agreed. Celia wondered what Yuki was thinking, and then suddenly said that from now on he wouldn't see Cecilia for a whole month. During that time he should learn how to deal with girls. The young man began to panic and begged Celia to give him at least 2 more weeks, but the woman firmly refused. Cecilia said that, in her opinion, the main character had already thought through his behavior enough and would not do it again. Celia smiled and asked if the girl could hold out for at least a month. Cecilia was confused and could not find the words. The woman smiled and said that she would shorten the period to 2 weeks. Only after that time could the young man see Cecilia. This could help them become closer to each other. The young man stood in the middle of the street and thought that perhaps this separation could make their feelings stronger. He understood that tears would not lessen his pain. The scene of Celia ordering Sophia to take him out of the estate came alive in his memory. At that moment, it seemed to him that Cecilia's smile was so kind that tears involuntarily came to his eyes. The young man decided for himself that he would never give up. When he meets Cecilia again, their bond will become even stronger. One day he will dare to reveal his feelings to her again. It took some time before the young man opened his eyes and found that he had turned into a demon. He looked around in surprise, trying to understand where he was and what kind of strange place this was. Suddenly, someone called his name, and Yuki saw Cecilia. The girl, looking at him, asked if he was really the same Yuki she knew before, because now he looked completely different. The girl admits that it was really her doing. The boy reacts in surprise to her words, and at that moment his demonic appearance disappears. Cecilia wonders if the young man has mentioned anything important. But Yuki just apologizes and says that his head is completely off and he doesn't understand anything. The girl extends her hand to the young man and invites him to come with her. Yuki squeezes her hand and asks where they are going. Cecilia stands in the middle of a field of flowers, then approaches the young man and hugs him tightly. He calls her by name. The young man looked at the girl carefully, gathered courage, and declared his love for her. Proposing marriage, she happily agreed. And then the girl offers to touch her lips in a kiss. The young man was extremely surprised when he said her name, and then suddenly woke up and realized that he was actually kissing a pillow. Yuki stood in silence for a moment. Next to him stood a boy, as still as a statue, who also said nothing. Then suddenly the young man exclaimed that it was all just a dream and a figment of his wild imagination. He covered his face with his hands and wondered why Cecilia had agreed at that moment. The question had haunted him like a haunting dream since they had parted ways 2 weeks ago. Suddenly the young man turned sharply and looked at Guy. He grabbed his hand and asked with excitement if it was really Guy who was sending him such strange dreams. Gargoyle didn't understand Yuki's words at all, so as not to look like a fool. It was impossible to believe that such a strange dream had appeared at this very moment. It was too absurd, and he needed to concentrate and pull himself together. Yuki turns Guy into some kind of abstract sculpture whose meaning is incomprehensible. Then he sits down heavily next to him and quietly asks Guy to forgive him. After all, yesterday had been an extremely sad day for Yuki, and now he began to doubt everything. Guy asked in surprise why he was being disfigured again, and the young man smiled awkwardly and apologized again, explaining that he had simply accidentally angered Cecilia. The gargoyle replied that he wasn't interested in human relationships, so no amount of excuses would convince him. Yuki looks back at Tom and says that he's not a very good person, before turning to leave. Guy began to loudly assure him that he had actually heard every word, no matter who or what was said. However, Yuki calmly replied that he still didn't understand anything. Then Yuki decides to seek advice from Clayman. He goes to the Adventurers Guild, where the man listens carefully to him and says, "This is how it is. Sometimes it's better to keep quiet and just go through a few unpleasant moments. If a young man is patient, even heaven can wait patiently at his feet." Yuki thinks he shouldn't have even thought about asking Clement for advice. The man asked if he had said that wrongly, and the young man replied that it could only help him and Sophia, but it would not benefit him personally. Suddenly, the young man feels a hand on his shoulder. He turns and asks Raven about his day off. After a little hesitation, the young man begins to ask Yuki about what happened to him. The young man believes that Raven is more driven by reason than emotion. He says that he wants to talk to him, and asks if Raven has a moment to spare. Raven reminds him of Yuki's request and asks what he wants to talk about. Yuki says that he wants to ask the young man something if he doesn't mind. Raven immediately perks up and happily replies that he doesn't know if he can help, but he'll do his best, since they're friends. The main character finds this extremely cute, so he smiles and suggests moving to another place because it's a bit cramped here. Eventually, they reached Yuki's room. Raven looked at the gargoyle and curiously asked the boy if it was really a new statue that had appeared in his possession. He looks at the statue carefully and says that it is really beautiful. Yuki was very surprised that someone liked his work. He was sure that he had created something incomprehensible. Raven looked at the young man, who was watching him intently, and asked if he had said anything incomprehensible. Yuki replied that it was okay, although deep down he admitted to himself that he did not understand this strange world at all. The young man claims to have come to talk to Raven about relationship advice. He is surprised to learn that it is Yuki who wants to discuss love with him. He admitted that he wasn't really sure about himself, so he didn't know if Yuki should share his thoughts with him. Then Yuki advised the guy to at least try to listen. After Yuki finished her story, Raven summed up. In general, he had offended a loved one by speaking poorly at the wrong time, and now, during the next meeting, he wanted to behave with dignity. Yuki was surprised that Raven could actually care about such things. To him, the young man had always seemed like a real handsome man, albeit with a voice that was a little too soft. Suddenly, Raven decides to apologize and offer a gift. Yuki thinks about the gift and recognizes the pendant, the same one they saw on their last date. Then everything turns into a real mess, and they never manage to buy the pendant. Yuki smiles happily and tells Raven that it's a great idea. She recalls how they failed to buy one important thing during their last meeting. Raven's face darkened. Yuki asked what happened, and the boy replied that Yuki had already started dating his girlfriend, and their relationship was becoming closer and closer. Compared to him, Raven seems like nothing. Yuki realizes that their relationship with happiness has not progressed at all. At that moment, Yuki has an idea. He suggests that Raven go shopping with him to pick out gifts. Raven wonders if he should go, but Yuki assures him that he can create something special and that wonderful things will happen. Although Hipponese is not used to revealing her feelings, she sincerely appreciates everything that pleases her. It would also be a great excuse to meet up. Raven smiles and makes it clear that he likes the idea of gifts. Yuki asks if that's true, then why are they wasting their time? He suggests that the young man go with him. Raven agrees. They eventually approach an accessories store. Raven hides under her disguise, but inside she notices many couples in love leisurely strolling between the windows. Raven whispered awkwardly to Yuki, asking why they were in such a hurry to make a decision, since he wanted to go home too. Yuki replied that he understood the boy, but it was too late to back down. Since the guests have already arrived, it's time to go and choose gifts. Raven agrees and begins to carefully choose decorations. Yuki watched Raven as he thought seriously about choosing a gift. Suddenly, a consultant approached him and asked if she could help the young man find the right gift. Raven takes out a piece of paper and writes that Umi needs a hair ornament. Hearing this, the girl wonders what kind of ornament she means. Raven nods in the affirmative, and then she shows him where to go, inviting him to come with her. Yuki remembers how Raven always carries a pen and paper with her so she doesn't have to talk to people. It's at this moment that Raven suddenly stops and says that this is beautiful. Her attention is caught by a beautiful rose-shaped hairpin made of white feathers. Yuki thought that Raven had finally decided to take the feather ornament. He had chosen what he needed for happiness. Now it was his turn to choose his own jewel. He looked at the pendant that he and Cecilia had been unable to purchase last time and was relieved to note how good it was that it was still available. Finally, they chose wonderful gifts and left the store holding stylish packages decorated with roses. Suddenly, Raven heard someone calling her from the side. It was McCain. The girl turned to the swordsman again and said that she remembered. They were on the same team. It seems that the priest was also with them. She smiles and wonders why two guys would suddenly come to such a store. The girl is starting to guess something, but Yuki interrupts her and asks what she is thinking about. He replied that they had just come to choose gifts, that was all. The girl wondered who they had decided to buy these gifts for. Yuki was about to say that he was preparing a gift for his beloved Cecilia, but Raven stopped him and strictly ordered him to be silent. McCann laughed and admitted that she had always thought the swordsman was hunting their priest, but apparently she was wrong. Raven felt awkward. Compared to Yuga, he, without even realizing it, always attracted crowds of girls to him, because he couldn't leave their kindness and care unnoticed. Raven didn't just avoid girls. He kept away from all people. That was the swordsman in the hero team. She looked at Raven carefully, sighed, and said that, as usual, she wouldn't expect a word from him. She then apologizes for the first time she laughed at the boy's voice when they were in the same group. Yuki looked at the girl and remembered how she had laughed at Raven's voice too. Similar moments flashed through his memory, but this time it seemed like the girl truly regretted her actions. Suddenly, a strange sound is heard. Yuki tries to figure out what it was, and then he and Raven look at the confused McCain. The girl asked what they needed, and whether they really weren't hungry anymore. Yuki denies that there is anything like that. On that note, they will probably move on. Suddenly, McCain stopped the young man and said that she had not managed to talk much yet, so she suggested going to a restaurant. Yuki was indignant and asked why this girl was deciding everything for them, to which Raven replied that it was useless to argue with her. If McCain wanted something, it would happen. Some time passed, and they finally reached the restaurant. Yuki kept thinking, if they had just gone out to get a gift, why did everything turn out this way? As she looked at the menu, she involuntarily spoke about the luxurious atmosphere that reigned here. The waiters here are always friendly, and the food is simply top-notch. At that moment, Raven leans over to Yuki and starts whispering, asking if he likes Cecilia. He understood this from the look on Yuki's face when McCain mentioned the gift. Yuki doesn't object and quietly admits that yes, it's her. Raven suddenly trembled and, looking at Yuki in fear, said that she had angered Cecilia herself. Yuki whispered softly to Raven to stop, because it wasn't the most important thing right now. First, they had to figure out how to get rid of McConaughey's annoying questions, so they needed a plan. Meanwhile, a waitress approached McConaughey and asked what they wanted to order. Yuki rips out the menu and tells the girl to bring everything that's written here. McCain tries to stop them and asks how much they're going to eat today. Yuki replied that he was hungry and that men should eat a lot. McCain just shrugged, saying she didn't care. Meanwhile, I ordered myself a light cocktail. At this time, the young men were busily devouring the food that had just been brought in. McCain noticed that they did not seem to be at all interested in engaging in conversation with her. Yuki smiled, imagining how you wouldn't be able to talk while eating. That was exactly what he and Raven had planned. McCain sighed and said that she would like to talk to Cecilia about various interesting stories. Yuki quickly drank a glass of water and, without wasting time, asked McCain to continue the story. The girl smiled gracefully and suggested that the young man listen to her stories first. She asked how his relationship with the priestess Cecilia was going. Yuki jokingly replied that it couldn't be called successful. Meekin explains that Cecilia is a priestess who is part of the group of heroes. It turns out that she went on a date with a simple young man, a very ordinary person. Meekin adds that this guy has no outstanding achievements at all. Yuki says there are reasons for this. Makani sighs softly and points out that Yuga often did things that could irritate the priest. Yuga could have entered the priest's room just as she was changing, or they could have accidentally bumped into each other in the shared bathroom at a completely inopportune moment. Yuki was angry and immediately asked where the hero was now. He began to cast a spell and angrily declared that he would destroy this hero. However, McCain intervened, stood in front of him, and calmly asked him to calm down. The main character not only has many girls around him, but also real luck. He constantly finds himself in situations where he sees Cecilia from different, sometimes very unexpected sides. McCain said she was still talking, so the young man should be quiet. Cecilia was still gently scolding him then, but that was when things got worst. Yuga, without even suspecting it, won the hearts of girls in the cities and villages where his travels took him. He had to stay in each place for no more than 3 days, because the girls themselves began to visit his hotel without an invitation. The hero was too kind to refuse hospitality to anyone. No matter how much McCann warned him, he still arranged to meet the girls, which constantly interfered with their journey. And it was then, after a long delay on the journey, that the limit was reached. Cecilia finally returned to the hero. She said he was too careless with women. Then began a long lecture that lasted almost 2 hours. Just because she was always nice and friendly didn't mean you couldn't make a priestess angry, and if you did, it would be really scary. Then McCann wonders if the young man would like to finally hear the story of the swordsman. Yuki is happy and apologizes to Raven because he is still eating. He turns to Raven, who shows him a piece of paper saying he can't eat anymore. Yuki quietly asks the young man if he's okay. Raven replies that he's having a hard time eating because he's worried that McConaughey might start talking about him and their awkward adventures, remembering all the weird moments he'd like to forget. Besides, he's just shy. The young man glances at Raven, then suddenly slams his fist on the table and loudly declares that he will protect Raven's pure love. McCann got angry and said that the boy was acting as if she was being cruel. Yuki responded by asking if that wasn't true. The girl admitted that she wanted to help them both, but in the end she couldn't do anything. The girl begins to feel embarrassed and admits that things haven't been going well between him and Yuga lately. She was thinking of telling them everything to get some advice. Yuki was sure that they had come here simply to talk about life's difficulties. Although this might distract McCann from Raven, Yuki still asks the girl what's bothering her. McCann admits that Yuga doesn't communicate with her like he used to. She couldn't help but notice his indifference to her, and she knew perfectly well why. The girl turns to the swordsman and notes that he knows this too. Raven becomes wary. Yuki felt the conversation getting more and more tense. McCann asked if Yuki was sure he wouldn't tell anyone about this. He assured him that he would keep his promise. Raven nods, and McCann knows she trusts him. It seems like she's about to share the truth. This information has never been officially announced. However, in the Demon Lord's castle, they were defeated time and time again. Yuki was very shocked by this, and he suddenly realized that he had actually known about this for a long time. The girl explained that the issue here was not with the Demon Lord at all, but with one of the mid-ranking demons who lived in his castle. Yuki asks if this is true, but in his mind he realizes that he knows everything perfectly well. After all, this person in front of him is also himself. Han admits that the demon was extremely powerful. She has no idea how such a powerful opponent came to be in the Demon Lord's castle. Meanwhile, Yuki realizes that this is a very bad sign. The girl continues her story and adds that they suffered a crushing defeat. At that moment, they were ready to face death, but without even realizing how, they suddenly found themselves in a neighboring village. This demon even kindly healed the wounds he had sustained in battle. Yuki was surprised and remarked that his opponent had turned out to be surprisingly kind. McCann admitted that it was very humiliating for him. By his behavior, he made it clear that the difference between them was so huge that he even felt sorry for his rivals. Yuki says that they finally managed to win the Demon Lord over to their side. That's not bad. The girl agrees, but Yuki still feels the tension in the air. McCann agrees that the guy is right, but understands that when he hears her next words, he will most likely be angry with her because he loves Cecilia too much. The girl says that the demon set his conditions for them. He would only let them go further if they left the priest. It was McCann who was able to convince everyone else to accept these terms. The young man was surprised by what he heard. Raven turned to Yuki and told him not to blame her for everything, because it was his fault too. She simply did not see any other way out of this situation. However, the young man was struck by something completely different. Because of him, the relationship between Yuga and McCann is already bursting at the seams. The guy put forward these conditions to confess to Cecilia. To be honest, he is tormented by feelings of guilt. But now he is left on the sidelines, in love with Cecilia, unaware of the true state of affairs. Yuki asks if they really care even if she dies. McCann started shouting that of course not. This fight was never supposed to be this dangerous. One day, they encountered the Demon King right in front of his castle. They already knew what he was capable of. They had carefully analyzed all the lessons they had learned from their previous battles with their enemies, and were confident that this time they would be able to win. The people of Clarence were already confident of their victory when he suddenly appeared. Who would have thought that the Demon King was hiding another trump card? Yuki realizes that he cannot reveal to them the truth that he was actually a simple recluse. The people never doubted their victory. However, instead of winning, They lost to some unknown demons that this girl couldn't even tell about. Everything had to be done to ensure that people didn't lose trust in the hero's team. It was important to preserve Yuga's good name, because if everyone found out about the team's failure, it would hit him first. Defeats followed one after another, and within a month they had no excuses left. One day, McCain was informed that some strange heroes had appeared in their country. Mikan sought to protect Yuga, and suddenly a demon appeared before him with his proposal. The girl couldn't help but smile. After all, this was their chance. If they lose again, it will be over forever. The thought haunts her, but it is really just an excuse. She was ready to say goodbye to Cecilia, despite all the trials they had overcome together. Even though she could have died, her regret showed a sense of guilt. Yuki carefully watched and then listened to the story that happened to Cecilia. As soon as the demon lord fell, McCain became concerned that something was wrong with Cecilia. He immediately rushed to the girl to find out if she was okay. As soon as the Demon King was overthrown, Makani, despite her fatigue, rushed back to Cecilia. When she saw Cecilia, the girl smiled warmly and praised McCain. She immediately noticed that Cecilia was okay. Cecilia responded happily by saying that she was happy to see the girl unharmed. McCain could not find peace. Cecilia's words were spinning in his head. She reported that the girl was fine, there were no injuries, and immediately after that she fainted herself. That's how she lost consciousness. The girl couldn't find the words to say anything to Cecilia, neither to apologize nor to thank her. She only wanted to protect her lover, but now she owed Cecilia, and he seemed to have already distanced himself from her. Yuki asks the girl what she was thinking and wonders if she's okay now. Now McCain agrees and says that this can't go on any longer. The girl gets up, says it's time for her to go, and thanks everyone for listening to her. Yuki and Raven felt a slight sadness, and then they realized that it was time for them to move on. Some time has passed. The young man sits in his room and says to himself, "Tomorrow these long 2 weeks will finally be over." He has been waiting for this day with impatience. Approaching the mirror, the young man carefully looks at his reflection. He looks at his reflection and feels sorry. However, no one is able to defeat this young man, but he will still perish in the crimson flames. Today is the worst day for everyone. At the same time, the main character looks very arrogant. Yuki was proud of his amazing manner and how well he chose his words. But then Guy turned to him and asked, "What kind of show is this guy putting on here?" Yuki turned around abruptly, blushing and screaming in terror. Then he quickly ran out of the room, while Guy stood there, not understanding why the boy was reacting so strangely. The young man, hiding his reddened face in his hands, admitted that the thought of meeting Cecilia tomorrow had captivated him so much that he had completely forgotten about Guy. He even involuntarily wondered, when does this guy even rest? When he opened his eyes, Till was standing before him, her bag on her back. The girl greeted him and smiled, noting that it had been a long time since they had last seen each other. The young man agrees with Till that they haven't seen each other for a long time, and then asks what she came for. The girl replies that a lady asked her to tell him that he should come to the mansion tomorrow. Yuki asked in surprise if the girl had really come to thank her. Then she turned to Tilt and asked what she was hiding behind her back. The girl replies that they are books. The boy asks what the books are about, and the girl agrees to tell him. Yuki watches her face, which is beaming with a satisfied smile. The young man replied that he was going to leave, but he could still come to the boy if necessary. The girl agreed and thanked the young man. She looked very happy. The young man cannot return home yet, and he does not want to. He has already taken the money, so now he is just wandering the streets. A young man notices a bakery and imagines the delicious cupcakes there. He goes inside and immediately thinks the saleswoman is a young girl. A huge burly man approached the young man, which made a great impression on Yuki. The young man wondered where the former saleswoman had gone, and he asked the new employee about it. He replied that his sister was too overworked, so now her brother was replacing her. Then the man puts the cupcakes in a bag for Yuki, apologizes for going a little overboard and accidentally crushing them. The young man thanked the man, looked carefully at the scattered cupcakes, carefully tasted them, and said with a smile that they were actually very tasty. Then everything went wrong. The young man accidentally pushed a terrible human beast. Then he saw a couple mocking the lonely young man, and a little more, and he almost stepped on some abomination on the ground. Yuki realizes that this day is clearly on his side. He walks cheerfully forward, but suddenly notices a boy who, having tripped, has spilled his skewered kebabs on the ground. The main character bought another portion of kebabs and gave it to the guy. At the same time, he bought another portion for backup. He asked the boy to be more careful in the future, for which the boy thanked him. Yuki just sighed. The main character was about to say that he had no luck at all today, but suddenly he felt something missing and saw a man hurrying away. The young man was loudly indignant, wondering why he was so unlucky today, that he even met a pickpocket. Without thinking, he rushed after him. The young man ran out into the alley and shouted loudly that the pickpocket wouldn't just run away. He kicked the pickpocket, and at the same moment, the pickpocket came face to face with another thief. Yuki was surprised. Another one had unexpectedly appeared. The young man replied that everything was fine, but now the main thing was to find the wallet. Suddenly he heard someone call his name. He turned around to see Yugi aiming his sword at him. The young warrior sternly ordered Yuki to return the stolen wallet. Yuki explained that it was actually his wallet. Since he had just been robbed, Yuga understood everything and replied that he had no intention of returning the wallet. In that case, he decides to take what he wants by force. The young man swings his sword, but Yuki cleverly dodges it and tries to convince Yuga to listen to them. Later, Yuga was with the city guard. Yuki realized that today had become the worst day for him. The guards turned to Yuki and told him to tell them everything at headquarters. The protagonist realized that this was truly the worst day of his life. Yuki was sitting in the city guard's room, his hands in handcuffs again. The boy turned to the guard and repeated for the second time what he had explained countless times. He had only returned the stolen bag. The post office guard suspiciously asked if this was the first time the young man had really broken down. He sternly ordered him not to insist, but to tell everything as it was. Yuki frowned and assured him that he was not lying, although at that very moment he was wondering how to proceed in such a difficult situation. Of course, Yuga only says what he thinks is necessary, which is why he immediately becomes a villain to many. Yuki closes his eyes, realizing how bad things have become. Suddenly, Raven enters the room. The guard flinches in surprise and immediately turns to Commander Raven. Yuki was genuinely surprised when he saw Raven and the young man, who were carefully watching everything that was happening. Raven showed the guard a piece of paper, and he read what was written on it. The young man was wondering what had happened. Yuki sat silently next to him. The swordsman took the paper again and wrote a request to the guard to listen to him carefully. A little while passed, and the male guard saluted and wished Raven and the young man a good day. Then the handcuffs were removed from Yuki, and he waved his hands in relief, glad that his ordeal was over for the day. During a fair investigation, Raven proved Yuki innocent. In the end, Yuga realized his mistake and sincerely apologized to the young man. Yuki sighed and admitted that he only dared to run away because Raven advised him not to apologize for anything. From the window, he noticed Yuki being taken to the police station. Raven told Yuki that he would seriously scold Yuga and sincerely apologized for everything. Yuki agreed, noting that the situation was very unpleasant for her. The young man turns to Raven and asks if he communicates with Yuga, but he immediately admits that he simply writes his thoughts with a pen on paper. Yuki remarked to Raven that he was unlikely to convince anyone with such words. To this, the boy replied that he would somehow manage, because once a funny story happened to him at a party. But the story ended as abruptly as it had begun. The door burst open, and Duke appeared in the room, calling out to Raven. She told me that she had heard that the captain was being held in a nightly order. She was already opening her mouth to find out exactly where he was being held. But suddenly she noticed Yuki standing next to Raven. The latter narrowed her eyes and looked towards the main character. The Duke sternly looked the captain straight in the eye and informed him of what had happened, for he had broken the law without Cecilia's supervision. Yuki immediately shouted that he had broken no laws. The Duchess nodded, saying she understood everything, but admitted that one thing bothered her: how the young man had managed to allow himself to be robbed. Yuki was embarrassed and asked them not to say anything more about it. At that moment, Raven was sitting at the table writing something down on a piece of paper. He remembered that he had forgotten about it today and apologized to the boy for his inattention. Then he finishes writing and announces that he has written everything through a special label. Now they can go to Yuga. Yuki thought that this stack of papers in Raven's hands looked very big. The Duke told Raven that it didn't matter to her whether he was a hero or not. Raven asked him to stop talking because she was already worried. Raven left the room, and Yuki crossed his arms over his chest and asked the Duke for a moment, noting that Raven seemed to be implying that the Duke was being too pushy. The girl flinched nervously and assured him that this was not the case at all. Yuki then explained that Raven was no ordinary person, but a true Commander Duke. The girl replied that she only obeyed this guy because he was their captain, and addressed him as commander in front of others. At that moment, someone knocked on the door and apologized. Both of them immediately turned around, looking in her direction. A charming girl with an elven appearance quietly entered the room. Her name was Elena. The girl turned to the Duke and confessed that she had secretly escaped from training again. Yuki only looked at her contemptuously. Elena confidently took the Duchess by the hand and ordered her to follow her. Yuki looked closely at this girl and noticed her pointed ears. Then he realized that he was looking at a real elf. Yuki had no idea that elven knights existed, and he wondered how the Duke tried not to take his worries out on others. Finally, Yuki decided that it was time for him to leave too. Later, he met the hero Yuga. The young boy was happy that Yuki had finally left the building. The main character just looked at the hero Yuga with disdain. Yuki turns to leave, but Yuga grabs his shoulder and tells him to stop. He says he was waiting for him. Then he suddenly realizes that they have met before, because this young man was with Cecilia. Yuki agrees. Yuga adds that it was so dark in that dark alley that he simply did not recognize him. He asks Yugi to accept his sincere apology for what happened. The young man wonders if he has offended Yugi. Yugi himself looked courageous and exuded true courage. Yuki closed his eyes as a bright light began to radiate from Yuga. The protagonist realized that he was very close to the Night Squad and did not want to cause Raven any more problems. The young man assured everyone that he was fine. The hero asked if this was true. He remembered that there was a nice restaurant nearby and suggested that the young man keep him company. Yuki agreed and immediately followed the hero. The young man exclaimed that the hero was too noisy and should behave more modestly. To this, Hugo replied that he had not intended to attract so much attention to himself. Eventually, they reached the restaurant. Yuki remembered that he had been there before with Makani and Ravenback. Hugo noted that the place was very spacious, and the staff genuinely loved their jobs. Yuki remembered McCain's words about the great food and excellent service. He mentally noted that he already knew a lot about this place thanks to Makani. The young man looked at the menu with interest, and noticed that everything looked very interesting. Hugo agreed with him, nodding. At that moment, a waitress approached them. Yuki said that he would only take a drink from the menu. The girl was surprised that the boy didn't want anything else. The main character agreed, deciding that the reason was that he had eaten so much last time that he was now tired of the food from this place. Then Hugo interrupted his thoughts and once again sincerely apologized for what had happened earlier. He admitted that he had been too reckless, and that was what had led to these consequences. Yuki just shrugged. Everything was fine with him, and to be honest, it didn't bother him at all. Pugo said that the young man, being a hero, did not understand at all how an innocent person could be treated so frivolously. Yuki thought he must be being too harsh on the hero, but the hero just waved his hand and said it was okay. Hugo sighed in relief, then jumped up abruptly and urged the young man to get down to business. He asked what was going on between Yuki and Cecilia. Yuki was silent for a moment, then calmly replied that he and Cecilia were just friends. Hugo was stunned and exclaimed in concern that this was very bad, because Cecilia was friends with that guy. He asks again if there really is nothing between Yuki and Cecilia. Yuki replies that if Hugo doesn't believe him, he can ask Raven too. They are friends too. There really is nothing between them, so Yuki doesn't understand why the hero is so surprised. Hugo is genuinely surprised to learn that the young man is also friends with Raven. Yuki only agrees with a smile. The hero was a little surprised and fell silent for a moment. He thought about his friends and began to talk quietly to himself. Yuki looked at him in disbelief. Hugo sat down at the table, became serious, and asked if he could ask the young man for advice. Yuki wonders why he would give such advice, at which point Hugo awkwardly admits that he doesn't really have any friends at all. Yuki was incredibly surprised and exclaimed that this was truly a disaster. He should never have found out about Hugo's pitiful secret. The hero ponders how to behave in order to become closer to Cecilia. Yuki immediately realizes that the situation is getting complicated. He begins to get nervous. Although the main character told Hugo that he and Cecilia are just friends, this does not mean that he does not have feelings for her. Of course, he is not going to help his rival. Yuki apologizes and admits that he recently met a girl. Compared to other guys, he is still a complete stranger to her. So, Hugo should have been closer to the girl than Yuki, so he should reach out to someone on the team. Hugo remarks that Raven is unlikely to help him after the recent scolding. The boy then shows off a huge stack of papers, adding that it's the first time he's seen Raven write so much. Yuki also notices this pile of documents and is surprised. There really are a lot of papers. The hero also adds that Makani is not suitable either, because she is completely indifferent to Cecilia. Yuki is surprised by the young man's words and does not understand why Hugo thinks so. Yuki is interested in Makana and wants to know what kind of person she is. Hugo asks the protagonist if he really knows her well. He replies that Makana has been his girlfriend since childhood. Since then, she has always supported him and helped him in everything. However, she had already brought this question up with Cecilia once, so he would never be able to forgive her for it. He asked Yuki if he really thought Makan was so cruel. He couldn't believe how she could do that to her friend. Yuki got irritated and asked him to stop and not jump to conclusions. Hugo was surprised when the young man suddenly became so serious. Yuki said that she was the one who convinced the demon to agree to the deal. However, he wondered why she did it. He asked Hugo if he really thought Mikane alone should bear this burden. In response, Hugo asked how he knew all this in the first place. The main character said that Raven and McCain recently revealed something to him. It turned out that all this time the girl had been blaming herself for what happened. Yuki turns to Hugo in annoyance, asking if he even understands that McCain has been crying all day and night. Hugo was surprised and asked why she thought so, since it was McCanny who had left Cecilia. She is the only one who agreed to the demon's terms, so the others consider her terrible. Yuki screamed, demanding that Hugo stop saying whatever he wanted. Even Raven felt embarrassed by the situation. But what about the hero himself? Did he ever feel responsible for his actions? Hugo exclaimed that this was completely wrong and that Yuki was wrong. He was sure that the hero would never do such a thing, because it was completely unlike his character. Yuki asked him to calm down and answer the question again. She wondered if this young man was really not as angelic as he seemed at first glance. Hugo could not hide his surprise, and tears gradually appeared in his eyes. Yuki realized that things were going really badly. Hugo admitted that he was the worst of them all. He blamed all the problems on Makini while stubbornly denying his involvement. The reason for everything was that he couldn't defeat that demon. Yuki suddenly noticed that tears were already glistening in Hugo's eyes. This guy is still very young. Yuki should have watched her words more carefully. She turned to the hero and asked him to listen. This was the first time in his life that he had failed. Would he give up now? He must understand. You can't be happy if you constantly deny your share of responsibility. Yuki realized that he was the one who brought the hero to tears, but he sincerely hoped that it wouldn't turn out badly for him. Huko said that when McCann learned about his dream of becoming a hero, she began to study magic diligently. When he did something rash, she constantly scolded him. From childhood to this day, he has only caused trouble for everyone. Now he himself does not know what to do. Yuki noticed that it was no wonder that Yugo was behaving this way, that he was constantly being scolded. This surprised Yugo quite a bit. The young man explains that Miss McCann is doing all this out of concern for the hero, and asks if he understands that. Hugo laughed happily and said that he would immediately go and apologize to her, and then he would listen carefully to all her complaints. Yuki assured him that everything would be fine, and Hugo took the boy's hand and said that he still trusted him, so he wouldn't let him go to Makana alone. Yuki was very surprised. After a while, Hugo and Yuki finally reached Mokna's house. Yuki was breathing heavily, trying to catch his breath after the long journey. After that, I asked Hugo if he was really doing it on purpose. He replied by asking where the young man was going in such a hurry. Hugo apologized and admitted that if he had gone alone, he wouldn't have had the courage. He asked Yuki to wait for him outside. Yuki agreed, and Hugo was happy and thanked the boy. The hero remembered that he had almost forgotten to introduce himself, so he gave his name. The young man replied that his name was Hugo, and it was nice to meet him. Thanks to Hugo, the hero realized his inattention and sincerely thanked him for it. The protagonist gives his name, and sincerely says that he is also very happy to meet you. It seemed to him that Hugo had already restrained his ardor a little. Now Hugo begins to suggest to Yuki what they could do next time. But the protagonist gently pushes him aside and insists that he leave already. So Yuki was the one who caused the fight between Hugo and Makane, and now he was the one who helped them make up. Now Yuki thought that sometimes it's better to encourage others more often. Then Yuki noticed that the young man didn't even knock on the door. At that moment, Hero Hugo opens the door to McKenny's house, and at that very moment, the girl was changing. McCain noticed that Yuki had come to her house. She was startled and screamed loudly. Yuki appeared in the doorway. McCain was completely surprised when Hugo suddenly appeared at her house and found her at such a moment. Yuki felt surprised. How could he forget that Hugo was just a lucky guy? At that very moment, the hero shouted to McConaughey not to interrupt and to listen carefully to him. The girl asked him to wait, because the situation was very uncomfortable. Hugo replied that he understood everything. He had been too cruel to her. Yuki said that Hugo was simply incorrigible. Hugo kept telling Makani that she was always there for him, supporting and helping him in everything. However, he behaved like a real egoist. Later, he did ask the girl for forgiveness. McCain blushed with shame and quietly said Yugi's name. The guy understood that simple apologies were not enough here, and they would not change anything. But he felt that in order for her to feel at least a little better, something more had to be done. Hugo said the girl should scold him. Yuki and McCain stood nearby, stunned by what they saw. Then McCain got angry, but suddenly smiled broadly, even laughed, and said that this young man had just burst in out of nowhere just when she was changing clothes, and now he was asking her to scold him. She smiled and asked if the boy really liked to suffer pain. Hugo was surprised and asked what she was talking about. He just wanted to make things right. Then the girl grabbed her magic staff and, without even asking permission, announced that she was going to teach the young man a lesson. She swung it and hit him. Yuki turned away from them and decided it was time to head home, while behind him the two were still arguing with each other. Maybe when the anger subsides, they can finally reconcile. After some time, the young man returned home and, opening the door, saw Till and Gaia. The girl hugged the statue and enthusiastically told the gargoyle that he looked simply wonderful in this form. Gaia asked her not to come so close. Yuki closed the door and was surprised to remember that Till had been here all this time. Till was carefully wiping the statuette and apologizing profusely. However, Guy asked her not to worry, as the girl was not yet fully recovered. Till sobbed, lowered her head, and agreed with the gargoyle. Then Guy turned to the girl. If he stopped holding on to him, he could approach her. The girl was delighted. Yuki breathed a sigh of relief, a smile involuntarily appearing on her face. She thought they should walk a little longer so as not to disturb Till and Guy. Yuki slowly opened his eyes and saw Cecilia calling his name. She was sitting next to him on the bed. The young man was completely confused. The girl tucked a strand of hair behind her ear and confessed that she missed him so much that she had rushed here at full speed. Yuki blushed with surprise, and beads of sweat appeared on his cheeks. He jumped up sharply and screamed, and then noticed Guy's face next to him, frozen like a statue. Yuki asked in surprise what he was doing next to him. Guy replied with a smile that the young man had finally woken up. This was a real loss, because the dream had been simply incredible. Yuki was embarrassed, and, blaming everything on Guy, asked him why he had sent him such a strange dream. Guy was very abrupt. To this, the gargoyle replied that he decided to thank Yuki because he had helped Guy, and that was why he had sent him this dream. Yuki remembered Guy spending time with Till and realized what the demon meant when he thanked him. At that moment, Guy's face lit up with a smile, and he admitted that he really liked Yuki's new look, so he decided to use his powers a little for him. Yuki objected that the dream could not be considered a manifestation of gratitude at all. Guy replied that he did not know for sure what kind of dream he had, but he could say with certainty that it was not a nightmare. What the boy had seen in his dream was actually a reflection of his innermost desires. Yuki hid his face in his hands and blushed, and Guy couldn't understand why he was acting like that. Gargoyle explained that he just wanted to thank the boy, but it seems that everything didn't go as planned. The main character blushed and asked, "What else?" He really wanted to see Cecilia, but now he is so embarrassed that he doesn't dare. Then the young man replied that it didn't matter. She took the jewelry box for Cecilia and looked in the mirror. The young man struck a heroic pose and addressed his reflection, telling it to listen carefully. He would never forget this day. This moment would stay with him for the rest of his life. Many people slammed their doors and left. As he walked through the city, the young man didn't notice the other residents and thought he must have left a little too early. He notices a bakery and mentally decides, maybe it's worth going in and buying those magical cupcakes. But suddenly someone calls him from the side. The nice girl offered a free cupcake. She said he could have one since he had been to their bakery before. The young man was surprised and reached for the bag of cupcakes. The girl explained that her brother was very sorry that he had accidentally crushed their cupcakes. To apologize, their bakery was giving away free cupcakes today. And then the young man understood what was going on. Then he turns to the girl and her brother, gratefully thanking them for the cupcakes. The man strikes a heroic pose, and Yuki immediately realizes that he is the same person she knew before. Here the young man suddenly notices the man-beast. The man turns to him and explains with an apologetic tone that he stared at him impolitely last time. He was too careful then, but now he understands that he is facing a truly strong and skilled young man. Yuki thanked him for the introduction, and the man replied that he knew Clement. If Yuki had free time, he could always visit their guild, but it gradually became clear to the young man. The man had not meant to offend him on purpose. He simply had a stern look, and so Yuki decided that the man had mistaken him for a demon. Then the young man notices several people who look like security guards, and then notices a man with a small boy. The man bowed and turned to Yuki, apologizing for the trouble their young master had caused the young man yesterday. On behalf of Mr. Butler, he wanted to sincerely ask the boy for forgiveness. The young man looks intently at the boy, who is a young gentleman. He admits that he had been playing too long yesterday, so he didn't follow him. Now the man hands Yuki a small package and asks her to accept it as a small compensation. Yuki takes the package and thanks the man. Then they bowed and said goodbye. Yuki looked at the package with interest, wondering what was inside. After all, the young man was the son of a wealthy family, so perhaps there was something very valuable in the box. The young man opens the bag and is surprised. Inside are many skewers with juicy fried meat. There were really a lot of them. Yuki visited the manor to meet Cecilia. He felt that today was a special day, and it seemed that no one was going to give him any favors. He was met at the threshold by Happiness, who kindly called him captain and told him exactly where to go. Yuki greeted a girl named Happiness and assured her that she shouldn't go with him because he knew these places very well. But the girl smiled and, ignoring his words, asked the guy to follow her. It's her job, so the guy has no right to refuse. Yuki is forced to agree. He wonders why this girl is so serious. Happings leads Yuki down the corridor, and he begins to tremble. He finally gets to see Cecilia. The young man is about to open the door, but suddenly starts to get nervous. The cheerful Nai teases him, calling him shy, and Yuki, confused, shouts and wonders who exactly the girl is talking about. Happiness asks in surprise what the young man is talking about. Yuki, in turn, wonders why the girl is treating him like that, but Happiness pretends as if nothing happened. Yuki exclaims indignantly that his hearing is fine, and he certainly didn't mix anything up. Happens asks if Yuki has really calmed down. Yuki is surprised by the question, and immediately apologizes to Happens. He sincerely thanks her, because it is thanks to her that he can now keep himself under control. He believes that Happiness is truly beautiful. The protagonist smiled, deciding that it was time to go inside. Then Yuki enters Cecilia's room and is overjoyed. The girl was sitting, engrossed in a book, but, noticing Yuki, turns to him and says that they haven't seen each other for a long time. The young man scratches his head in confusion and guesses that about half a year has passed. The girl laughs happily in response and explains that it has actually only been half a month. The young man still looks funny in her eyes. Then the young man changes the subject and tells the girl that he brought her some food. She looks into the bags and notices muffins and fried meat. The girl is surprised to notice that the guy's gift is really very unusual. Yuki laughs happily and explains that he actually got it all for free. With a smile on her face, Cecilia remarks that Yuki seems to have gotten used to life in both Manurva and this world. She continues her story and recalls the day the main character was in the Demon Lord's castle. Then he said he didn't want to live anymore. The girl smiles and asks the boy how he feels about his real life now. Yuki begins to tell the story. He said he was happier now than he had ever been before. Maybe it was because he now had someone worth living for. The strongest desire in his heart is to live this life next to Cecilia, because she has become the meaning of his existence. The girl said that it sounded really cool. She, like Yuki, also wants to find meaning in life. Yuki remarked that it was actually not that difficult. Cecilia laughed and replied that Yuki shouldn't be so modest. She says it's been a long time since they last met, so she suggests they have cupcakes together and will make them some tea right away. Yuki agrees, then curiously asks if it's not a maid thing at all. Cecilia replied that Sophia had taught her many things, and now her cooking skills had reached a new level. Yuki thought with curiosity that now he really wanted to try it himself. After a while, Cecilia prepared tea, and the young man and the girl sat at the table, savoring the fragrant drink. He looked completely relaxed and calm. The young man happily remarked that the tea was delicious, and sincerely said that he was simply happy. The girl smiled in return and remarked that the cupcakes were also delicious. Yuki felt like he had forgotten something, although he couldn't remember what exactly. The young man felt for a moment in his hand the gift box for Cecilia, and touched his pocket, checking to see if it was there. He remembered that he had come here to give her this locket. The young man remained next to Cecilia at the table. He watched her savor the cupcakes, closing her eyes in delight and enthusiastically telling her how delicious they were. He put the box in his pocket and held it tightly in his hand. It was at that moment that he realized that this was his only chance. Suddenly he felt something strange and stood up abruptly from his seat. Cecilia asked Yuki in surprise what had happened to him. Yuki went to the window and said that he just wanted to air the room. And it was at that moment that he noticed something outside the window. He spotted Hugo and McCain just outside Cecilia's house. Yuki wondered if they were being eavesdropped on at times. Meanwhile, the young man used his ability to enhance his senses. At that moment, Hugo could not contain his joy and turned to Nakana. "Look, we have already arrived at Cecilia's estate." The guy suggested that she not waste time and go and say hello to the girl. McCain asks you to stop, and then turns to the guy, asking if he remembers why they came here. Hugo confirmed that, of course, he remembered it well. They had made a mistake then, leaving such a valuable ally as Cecilia behind. That's why they're here, so she can scold them. McCain called the young man a fool and said that everything was done wrong. Then she punched him in the forehead. Hugo told McConaughey that he was in too much pain. He wondered if the girl had really done it out of concern for him, and thanked her. McConaughey was surprised and asked who had given the young man such strange ideas. Yuki realized that it was his prank, but now he is finally sure Hugo is a true pain lover. Then you turn to Makana and ask if they will go together. The girl in response reminds the boy. Has he forgotten that he has to apologize to her? Yuki thought for a moment, and suddenly realized that the situation was really serious. Hugo and McKenny were on their way. Their appearance could cause him great trouble. He wants to be alone with Cecilia. The young man turns to her with a request to help with something. The girl is surprised and does not understand at all what exactly he wants from her. After a while, the young man grabs the girl's hand and runs with her along the tightrope. The girl asks if Yuki can tell her where they are going. The young man apologizes to Cecilia, admitting that he must have overdone it a bit. However, somewhere in this house, there must be a place where no one will look. The young man asks Cecilia to wait in this place for a while he goes down. He leaned his back against the wall, wondering what to do next. At that moment, the Duke turned to Raven and asked how much longer he was going to just sit around in this place. She looked contemptuously at Raven, who was trembling with excitement. The girl impatiently asked him to quickly give her the gift he was holding in his hands. Yuki realized that Raven wanted to give a gift to Happiness. The young man wondered what if Happiness didn't like this gift. It seemed to him that it was all too risky. The boy was worried. If she refused, how would he be able to continue living? The Duke reassured him, reminding him that he was a knight, and therefore he had to behave courageously. She reminded him that he had even taken a vacation for this, so he shouldn't whine and feel sorry for himself. The guy admitted that the girl was right and firmly decided that he had to act, so he would just do it. He approached the door but suddenly froze in place and began to tremble. The Duke urged him on, loudly urging him to hurry, because if he delayed, Happy's lunch break would be over quickly. The young man apologized to the Duke, and Yuki silently wished him luck. Yuki realized that if he started worrying about Raven now, everything could go wrong. Cecilia calmly informed him that she was waiting for the young man right here as he had asked. Then the young man took her by the hand and led her away. The girl screamed and asked where he was taking her this time. The young man led Cecilia into the courtyard. Till was already there, talking to Sheikh and insisting that he listen to her. She said that she had gone to see the gargoyle yesterday. It seemed incredibly cool to her. But then, turning away from her words, she added, "It is always like this. But yesterday it was even better than usual." Then the girl asked the Sheikh if he was listening to her. The young man just smiled and, mockingly, shouted that he was actually asleep. Teole thought it was too early, but she had to tell him anyway. Yuki realized that Tilly was talking about the gargoyle again. Then he told Cecilia that this place wasn't right for them either, and suggested they move on. They noticed Sophia and Celia. Celia asked the girl if her daughter was okay. Yuki looked at them carefully. Cecilia moved closer to the young man and whispered quietly that it was very rude to eavesdrop. But the boy only replied that he was curious. He thinks about the fact that Clayman and Sophia have already become parents. Sophia once shared with Celia that it is not easy for them now, but at the same time she would not want her daughter to repeat the fate of her father. Celia asked in surprise, "And that's all?" After all, Sophia's husband is a really interesting person. The girl remarked that there would still be difficulties if she broke his character. At that moment, Sophia appeared at the door. She turned to Yuki, asking if he was okay. The young man, frightened, grabbed Cecilia and shouted that they had been exposed. They rushed to run away, and Cecilia shouted to Yuki as she ran that she had already told the boy everything. A little more, and they all ran to the library together. Cecilia took a breath, then turned to Yuki and asked him to tell her what exactly he was looking for in this house. Yuki thought that there was absolutely no place in this house where she could be alone. She apologized to the girl, assuming that she must have made her very tired. He takes out a box with a pendant and hands it to Cecilia. The girl is instantly embarrassed. She asks if Yuki really wants to give her this jewelry. The young man wonders if the girl remembers the moment when she couldn't buy this pendant in the store. That's why he bought this pendant as a gift. This time, things are different. He claims to be more serious than ever before. The girl paused for a moment, then smiled and thanked Yuki sincerely from the bottom of her heart. The young man was terribly upset, and she assured him that she would cherish his gift like the apple of her eye. Suddenly, the library door bursts open. Yuki and Cecilia immediately looked towards the entrance. Yuga stood nearby and, turning to Cecilia, said that he had finally found her. McCain and Hipponas stood next to him. Then he notices Yuki and wonders what the two of them are doing here. He asks what it all means. Suddenly, Mikan covers Yugi's mouth with his hand and emphasizes, Yuki and Cecilia look great together. Maybe she should reconsider her opinion. Raven and the Duke approached them. The girl turned to the captain, praising him for a job well done. One day, Sophia addressed everyone present. She called them honored guests and apologized for interrupting, but asked everyone to go to the courtyard. Everyone looked at her and each, without hesitation, supported her. Later, the main character Cecilia and everyone gathered in the courtyard, where they eagerly ate juicy meat on skewers. Cecilia turned to Yuki and said with a smile that it was wonderful that he had brought so much fried meat. The young man happily agreed with her, supporting her opinion. Then Hugo called Cecilia and asked if she could call her friend. The girl agreed, and Yuki stepped aside. Hugo admitted that he was well aware of his big mistake. He began to say that this was why the girl should scold him. But McCann didn't let him finish. She just hit him on the head. Then she shook the dust off her hands and exhaled. After that, the girl turned to Cecilia. Within moments, McCain was on her knees and sincerely apologized to Cecilia for revealing the truth to her. Cecilia was extremely surprised by such unexpected behavior. She smiled and said that if McCain was talking about that particular incident, then it was okay. McCain barely held back tears and admitted that the girl was her friend. Cecilia sits down next to Makona and asks if the girl remembers that they had no choice back then. As you can see, Cecilia adds, she is still with everyone. Cecilia reaches out her hand to the girl and says she will not torment her anymore. Makania smiles happily and thanks Cecilia for her mercy, expressing her sincere gratitude. Yuki looks at the girls and is mentally happy. Finally, everything will be back to normal. Suddenly, he feels someone gently tugging at his clothes. Yuki looks around to see who it is. The girl standing behind her was holding a beautiful feather ornament. Yuki wondered what had happened, then asked if the ornament in the girl's hands was really a hairpin. She confirmed that it was her gift. Yuki realized that this ornament was a gift from Raven. She said that Happing rarely received gifts, so why not let her try this ornament on? Happing agreed and put on the hair ornament. Then she notices them. He turns to Haiping and says that this hairpin is very cute. Yuki tells Jaepin that the jewelry suits her very well. Jaepin is embarrassed by what she hears and thanks Yuki for such a nice compliment. Yuki looks at the happiness and thinks how joyful it seems. He thinks Raven did a great job, but only recently had he seen him so depressed. Perhaps the reason was that he was not responding to him now. The Duke tried to cheer him up. Yuki was very interested and decided to watch from the side. Suddenly he heard someone calling him from the side. Yuki returns to Cecilia and asks if they have finished their business. The girl nods and thanks the boy. She admits that it was thanks to Yuki, Makan, and Hugo that they were able to get along. The young man admitted that he felt a little guilty, so he wanted to help these people somehow. Cecilia says it's very sweet. For some reason, ever since she met Yuki, there's been a white streak in her life. She hopes that he will continue to take care of her. Yuki replies that he wants that too. For some reason, it feels like they have known each other for a long time, like they have been together for a long time. If everything continues like this, it will be truly wonderful. The next day, the protagonist arrives at the Adventurers Guild. Knocking on a chair, he asks Clayman when he will finally be promoted to A rank. At that moment, the man is going through some papers and suddenly asks, why should he suddenly be promoted? Yuki says that all this time he was assigned only B-level tasks. Clayman doesn't understand what the guy is talking about because he's only been in the guild for half a year, and even a task of this level is already quite an achievement. Yuki admits that he wants to move on as soon as possible. Clayman, scratching the back of his head, advised the boy not to even think about it. If he is promoted to A rank, the number of difficult tasks will increase, which means even more hassle under Yuki's control. The man got angry and said that this meant even more work for him. Yuki replied that now everything was clear. It was laziness that made the man constantly avoid direct conversation. Yuki returns from the Adventurers Guild and sighs loudly from boredom. He complains that he is terribly bored and wants to take on something more difficult as soon as possible. In the end, Clayman still refused him. After all, if someone who had only joined the guild 6 months ago suddenly received such a high position, it would undoubtedly cause discontent among the others. Perhaps Clayman was still keeping a close eye on him. However, most likely all these problems will arise precisely because of that young man. The main character was quite upset by this thought. Some time passed and the young man returned home, announcing his return. Then Yuki noticed that when no one was home, Guy just slept peacefully. Gargoyle noted that this time Yuki had come home earlier than usual. Yuki says that his issue can now be considered resolved. He thought that the negotiations had failed, so to speak. In this case, Guy declares that he has something to say to the young man. After that, he took on his true form. Yuki asked in surprise what happened. She wanted to know why Guy had suddenly done this. The gargoyle assumed its true form. Its body began to crack. Yuki asked in fear what it was. He drew attention to the numerous large cracks that pierced the gargoyle's body. Guy revealed that he had been seriously injured in the last battle. His body would never be able to recover like it was before. Yuki wondered why Guy was only revealing this now, to which he replied, if he had told her earlier, would it have changed anything? Yuki replied that there will definitely be a cure. She believes that Tio will definitely find a way to help the gargoyle. Guy says they have no power to decide matters of life and death. He has very little time left. In 5 days, his body will be completely exhausted. That's why he wants to ask Yuki to take care of Till. She's just like him. She hasn't fully recovered yet. Yuki asks if it's all true. The gargoyle said that she's been getting worse and worse lately. He's been watching the girls since they were kids, so he notices any changes right away. Yuki agrees and says he will take Till under his care. Guy apologizes to the boy for the inconvenience and adds that he didn't want to say anything else. But Yuki objects and notes that he has one more question though. Yuki takes a confident stance and announces that he must help Guy too, because he has finally decided everything for himself. Guy asked if the boy could have hit his head. He said that there was almost no time left, so it was all meaningless, but Yuki objected. How could you know if something would work or not if you didn't even try? The young man asks Guy to just trust him. This house would be too boring without him. Hasn't he always been a true work of art here? Guy sighs and says he doesn't have high hopes. He can only sit and wait. He says that he calmly trusts Tail to the young boy. Yuki is sure that the boy will take care of Tail until the very end, even if he himself is in danger. Yuki explains that when it comes to demonic artifacts, it's best to contact the Duchess. However, he's currently racking his brains over where to find her. Some time passed, and the young man finally reached the night headquarters, where Duke and Irina were already waiting. Yuki went inside, and Duke was surprised to see that the captain himself had come here. Yuki was panting, trying to catch his breath, and finally said that he had found the girl. The Duke asked what the captain wanted, and then asked him to wait a moment, as he had to sort out some documents himself. Yuki agreed, and went to the sofa to wait. He fell heavily onto the sofa, barely holding back his fatigue, and muttered that he was terribly exhausted. If he could just take it and fly away, then Cecilia would definitely be angry with him. The main character was sitting and resting when Irene suddenly approached him. She introduced herself and then said that she had noticed how the young man and the Duke always supported each other. That's why she was curious to know what the young man and the Duke had in common. The young man who called himself Yuki left this world. Before he left, a thought flashed through his mind. The girl was so naive, so easy to manipulate. He told me that he and Duke had once worked together, one as a boss and the other as a subordinate. Yuki was Duke's captain at the time. Irina was impressed by this story, and enthusiastically said that Yuki was an extraordinary person. Irina asked what kind of captain this young man was. Yuki only said mysteriously that it was a strict secret. If he told this to the girl, she would have to say goodbye to her life. Irina was very scared. Suddenly the Duke approached them and turned to the captain, asking what he had just said to Irina in that place. The young man apologized, explaining that he was simply curious about how she would react. The Duchess assured her that she did not know what exactly the young man had told Irene, but emphasized that it was not true. The girl doubtfully asked if it was really so. To this, the Duchess explained that Captain was just the nickname of the young man. She informs him that she needs to speak to the captain alone. Hearing this, Irina realizes that she had better leave, and bows politely before leaving the room. Yuki noticed that this matter involved demons, so the Duke must be well versed in it, and they had a question. The Duke listened carefully to Yuki, and reported that the gargoyle's body was gradually disintegrating. The Duke said that magic minerals could solve this problem. It was actually very simple. Yuki was surprised. He couldn't believe that the solution was so elementary. He thought that it couldn't be that simple. The Duke remarked that this boy should know about this, but Yuki merely remarked in response that he had been sleeping in the temple all this time, so it was only logical that he didn't know. The Duke asked what would be best for the young man. As a representative of the demon race, it would not be fitting for him to ask such questions. Yuki apologized to the Duke, explaining that he was simply too lazy. Thanks to the Duke, he was able to save Gargoyle's life. He thanked the girl for her help, and the Duke just smiled and said that it was no problem. She was happy to help. However, the young man wonders where he can find the magic minerals now. He also wonders what those minerals even look like. He is already thinking about going back and asking the Duke about it in more detail. But suddenly, someone loudly calls out his name from the side. The young man turns and notices Cecilia hurrying towards him. Cecilia, barely able to catch her breath, tells Yuki that something very bad has happened to Till. Yuki is scared and asks if it's really that serious. The priest said that Till was cleaning and suddenly fainted. Shake is with her now, taking care of the girl. But it was Till who asked to call him here. Yuki wonders. For some reason, ever since the gargoyle started feeling sick too, she feels a connection between them. Cecilia is also worried. She wonders what happened to the gargoyle and if he's okay. Then Yuki told Cecilia the whole truth, and the girl was very surprised to learn that the gargoyle had only 5 days left before death. But Yuki already had a plan. He announced that he had found a way out of this situation. Magic minerals would help save the gargoyle. Then Cecilia asked in disbelief if this was really so. Yuki said that they still had to take care of what they had been doing so far. Eventually, they reached Till's house. The girl was extremely ill. She barely greeted the captain, and Yuki asked her how she was feeling. At this moment, the sheikh is sorting through the medicine and preparing it for the girl. He promised to do his best, but admitted that his supplies of medicine were not enough. Yuki replied that he understood and decided to go look for something else. Sheikh noted that this was exactly what was expected of the captain, and added that he was counting on the young guy. The sheikh said that this moment was only temporary, so he could not leave the girl alone. His eyes looked very tired. Cecilia asked if the sheikh was really worried about Tilly. The young man confirmed. Yes, it was true, because what happened to the girl also lies on his conscience. The main character asked everyone to trust him, promising to bring medicine. But Cecilia denied the young man and declared that she would take this matter upon herself. Yuki asked in surprise what exactly Cecilia meant. The girl replied that Yuki seemed to have forgotten that he was supposed to look after the gargoyle. Then Sheikh handed Yuki a list of herbs that were needed. Yuki confidently assured him that he had not forgotten anything, and looking at the list, he noticed that there were indeed quite a few herbs here. Sheikh asked what Cecilia and Yuki had been talking about, and what had happened to the gargoyle. Yuki decided to explain to me frankly what was happening. Suddenly, Tilly's voice was heard. The girl cautiously asked if Yuki was really telling the truth. Sheik explains that the girl can't get up, she needs to rest. Till shouts that she will be fine, but they need to hurry and save the gargoyle. Tears well up in her eyes, but she doesn't stop and continues to beg the boys for help. She gently takes the girl's hand and assures her not to worry, because Yuki will definitely find a way to save the gargoyle. Cecilia kept smiling, radiating warmth and light around her. Thiel asked in admiration if this was all real, then added that it was truly wonderful. She added that the girl shouldn't forget about herself. She, Sheik, Yuki, and she will take care of Till, so you don't need to worry about anything right now. Just rest. Till falls asleep after Cecilia uses magic. The girl returns to Yuki and tells her that her mission is to heal people and restore them to health. That was why the boy had to entrust this matter to her. She smiled at him gently. Yuki agrees, and Sheik asks to be allowed to help them until 2 o'clock. Then Yuki announced that he was going in search of magical minerals. Cecilia replied that in that case she would go collect medicinal herbs for Till. The young man asked Cecilia and Sheik to make every effort for Till and Guy. Some time passed, and the main character finally reached the merchant guild. The guild employee kindly apologized and explained that the magic minerals were not yet in stock. Yuki asked in surprise if they really didn't exist at all. The man confidently confirmed this. Yuki was upset because before coming here, he had carefully checked to see if everything he needed was sold here. Suddenly, Clayman appears next to the young man. The employee immediately greets him and apologizes for the delay. He informs him that the necessary information for the task has already been prepared. The man hands Clayman a piece of paper. Everyone around him greeted Clayman with joy, and some even asked in surprise if he was really that popular. Clem turned to the man and asked if he understood correctly that this task was more difficult than the previous one. The man nodded and added that the reward for it was also greater. Clayman looked at the young man and greeted him. He noticed that the boy had arrived just in time. Yuki replied that he was refusing, but Clayman smiled and denied that he had offered anything yet. Yuki says that he wants to give the young man this task, but now is not the best time, because first he needs to find the magic minerals. Clayman is interested in magical minerals, and then notes with delight that he was very lucky this time. After all, these minerals can be obtained by completing this very task. Clayman said that if the young man helps him, he will share what he has found with him. The young man asks if this is really so. Clement asked what position he thought the young man was aspiring to. He made it clear that he could put in a good word for the young man with his authority. Yuki wonders if this is really the same inheritance that suddenly made all the troubles disappear. He himself doesn't fully believe it, but it doesn't matter now. The claimant replied that if the young man really needed these minerals so urgently, they could leave tomorrow morning. Yuki was delighted because this was great news. He was ready to do anything for the magical miner. The man reminds them that they have a deal. The merchant curiously asks if they really intend to take on this task. Clayman agrees and promises to do everything possible not to let her husband down. Meanwhile, Yuki thinks about Clayman. She thinks he thinks too highly of himself. Yuki asks if the man can tell him the details. Clayman replies that it's pretty simple. You need to collect magic minerals. They're leaving tomorrow morning, so they agree to meet in front of the guild at dawn. Clayman says goodbye to the young man, and Yuki can't understand why the man told him the details of the case so superficially. Yuki knew he had no other choice. Cecilia and Sheikh were trying their best, so he decided to give it his all as well. The next morning, Yuki meets Cecilia. The young man is genuinely surprised to see Cecilia by the carriage. The girl greeted the young man. The young man greeted her in return and asked what she was doing here. Cecilia said she wasn't alone, and pointed to Sophia, who was sitting in the carriage. Clayman was sitting next to her. Yuki and Cecilia got into the carriage, and the young man immediately asked what it all meant. Cecilia calmly explained that she had visited several places that usually sold medicinal herbs, but had not been able to find the one he needed. These herbs only grow where magic reigns, so she asked Sophia to help and go with her. Sophia added that the mistress was having problems, and as head maid she could not stay away. Yuki thinks it's really cool. Sophia added that her husband was also going there on a business trip, so she decided to go with him. Yuki says he understands, as their goals are now aligned. He then cautiously asks if he can ask a question. Pointing to one of the companions, Yuki asks what happened to him. Sophia says with an indifferent expression that Clayman objected to her. But Yuki and Cecilia shouldn't worry because she's already decided everything her way. Clayman blinks, then gets up from Sophia's lap. Clayman declared that he could only fall asleep so soundly on Sophia's lap. Yuki, suspiciously, asked if Clayman had really come to his senses, because only someone who was still unconscious could talk such nonsense. Cecilia shared her impressions. Clayman's healing abilities are simply incredible. However, Clayman Grind himself added with a smile that the best treatment for him has always been Sophia. Yuki says he understands. The man has just recovered. But it's still worth explaining the mission to him, because he needs to know what's going on. The man explains that their mission is to destroy the monsters that have settled in the mines with magical minerals. He had heard that these creatures were no stronger than those with a C rank, but he still wasn't completely sure. Yuki hadn't seen anything suspicious yet and thought everything was going well. The main character wonders what's most important, whether they'll make it on time. Yuki reasons. If something goes wrong, he'll just fly to the gargoyle using magic minerals. Clayman suggests not telling the guild about their trip for now. Cecilia is surprised and asks why this is such an unexpected idea. Clayman replies that this way they can truly enjoy this journey. Suddenly, Sophia hit him and asked the man to watch his words. She said that she understood the girl's request. Yuki and Cecilia considered such behavior cruel. After a while, they reached their destination. Sophia looked at the hotel and said that they would stay here for the night and leave for the mines in the morning. Cecilia supported this idea and agreed with the girl. Yuki thought to himself, come to think of it, he had never seen Sophia actually perform maid duties. Now he wondered what exactly she was going to fight about. The next morning, Sophia goes out to Yuki and Cecilia with the news that the time has come. The young man is surprised to notice that she is still in her maid uniform. Cecilia asks if it is even possible to fight in such clothes. Sophia explained that this costume was intended for individual fights, so there was nothing to worry about. Her husband admitted that he liked to see his wife in this form. The girl blushed and became confused. Then Clayman approached them, asked what had happened, and told them they needed to move on. The group approaches a cave. Cecilia uses light magic to light the way for everyone. Yuki suddenly says that he heard that someone in their company is fond of maids. The man Yuki spoke to was a little surprised and asked why the young man suddenly started such a conversation. Yuki remembered that Clayman had once said that he liked it. The man immediately understood what the young man was leaning towards and explained that when he saw Sophia dressed like that, he felt calmer, because it seemed like she was doing a simple job. Yuki was suddenly surprised and admitted that he finally understood what the man was talking about. Clayman added cautiously, asking the boy not to take it as if she was forcing anyone. Yuki replied sincerely that, to be honest, he was actually jealous of their love. Clayman asked curiously what exactly the boy meant. Yuki changes the conversation and asks if Clayman and Sophia really have children. The man answers in the affirmative and informs them that they have a son and a daughter. Surprisingly, the boy looks a lot like his mother, and the girl resembles her father. And then Sophia turns to them and says that maybe it's time to stop talking because the monsters sneaked up on them a long time ago. Yuki was about to tell everyone that the monsters were here, but suddenly Sophia appears unexpectedly. She waved her foot, and all the monsters were destroyed in an instant. Yuki froze in surprise, Not believing his eyes, Sophia instantly dealt with the monster, literally pressing it into the ground. Kleiman notes that even though Sophia is now working as a maid, he cannot lend her strength. He understands that the young man also wants to protect Lady Cecilia, but reminds her that this place is under his and Sophia's care. Kleiman uses magic, and suddenly a multitude of paper men appear around him. Yuki, looking at them in surprise, asks Cecilia what they are. The girl explains that this Shikigami is a divine being. It is a special martial arts technique that allows you to control figures that look like people or animals. However, Yuki admitted that this was the first time he had seen anyone use paper dolls in battle. Cecilia agreed with the boy, adding that the dolls were actually quite powerful. Sophia says that he has always wanted to participate in the battle, but not completely immerse himself in it, which is why he chose this particular technique. He finds it unnecessary to transform his charges into other forms, so he lets them fight as they are. Yuki just sighs. This is exactly what should have been expected of him. Sophia reports that everyone is already gathered, so we can move on. The young man looks carefully at the map and confidently says, "It seems that they have already covered a considerable distance. A little more, and they will reach the mines." Then Kleiman looks ahead and notices in the distance a huge round monster greedily devouring rocks. Yuki was surprised, because this monster was huge and had some strange shade. Kleiman explained that this creature feeds on magical minerals. Usually monsters that eat rocks are limited to simple stones, but mutants like this are completely lacking in them. Yuki remarks that if this continues, they will be left with nothing. They need to deal with him as soon as possible. Kleiman asks him to stop, explaining that he has not finished his work yet. By absorbing magical minerals, this monster gradually changes its own body. These minerals contain a considerable amount of magic, so it turns out that ordinary magic is not at all dangerous for it. It simply cannot harm it. He points his finger at Cecilia and Yuki, and declares that this is why they will not be able to stand up to this monster. So, Fia slaps him on the hand, and strictly forbids him from pointing fingers at people. Meanwhile, Yuki is worried because she thinks it is unlikely that they will be able to harm this monster in any way. If the young man uses powerful magic, he is sure that he can easily defeat this monster, but there is very little space here. Kleiman reminds Cecilia and Yuki that they must not forget one more important thing. Mutants like this monster are extremely rare, so it must be kept intact. Sophia asked Kleiman why he had to take on such a ridiculous task. The man responded by yelling at the girl not to touch him and assuring her that everything had been thought out down to the smallest detail. In fact, according to him, it was very simple. He points at the young man and says that he will cover his body with Shikigami, and then the young man will have to defeat the monster from within. Then the man asks what he thinks about it, because the idea seems simply brilliant. Yuki shouted and asked why he had to do it, and why the man couldn't handle it himself. Kleiman calmly replied that he had to control the Shikigami, and therefore, he couldn't do two things at once. He assured him that the dolls would protect him, so there was no need to worry. But Yuki exclaimed that he would never agree to such a thing under any circumstances. At that moment, Sophia suddenly intervened and announced that she would do it herself. Kleiman was quite surprised and immediately objected. He could not allow Sophia to take such a risk. But the girl calmly replied that she was the only one among all who really knew how to fight in close combat. She reassures her husband, assuring him that everything will be fine. The main thing is that he uses his skills. Then there will be no problems. The girl wonders if she is saying everything correctly. Kleiman agrees. Sophia smiles and admits that she relies on his love. The man replies that in that case he simply cannot let the girl down. Yuki tries to understand what is happening to Kleiman, as he has never seen him like this before. The man returns to Yuki and Cecilia and asks them to keep a close eye on the monster. After that, he orders the mission to begin. Following Kleiman's orders, Yuki cast an earth-binding spell, and Cecilia used the holy chains. The monster was securely bound. It was held by sharp stone spikes restraining it from below, and also by a heavy chain. But suddenly it growled menacingly and began to struggle free with all its might. Yuki gathered all his strength and used even more powerful magic. He shouted loudly that it seemed that they had underestimated the enemy, so they needed to strengthen their control magic. Yuki summoned holy chains, a clamp lock, water pressure magic, and directed a snowstorm. The monster growled again at the whole world. Cecilia whispered in fear that the growl was incredibly loud, but Sophia interrupted her and said confidently that now was the time for her to act. Shaoda claimed that the monster opened its mouth and loudly shouted Sophia's name. He then used his Shikigami magic to surround the girl with paper dolls. She deftly jumped right into the monster's mouth. At first, he didn't even realize what had happened, but in an instant his entire body began to distort. It was Sophia striking directly from inside the monster. Kleiman summoned more of his paper dolls and ordered the monster to stop resisting. He then summoned the real Shikigami and sent them into battle. Yuki was surprised when Clayman summoned the real Shikigami. He admitted that he had never seen him so serious before. Cecilia replied that Clayman must be so focused because Sophia was already inside the monster. Clem turned to Yuki and Cecilia, sternly ordering them to be on their guard until the monster finally stopped moving. Cecilia and Yuki nodded seriously, agreeing to carry out the order. Finally, the monster fell unconscious, and Sophia was on top of it. Yuki reached out to Cecilia and praised her for her excellent work. Cecilia smiled back and said that they had done it together. Yuki replied that he had just tried his best. Sophia landed on the ground and Clem, without hesitation for a second, rushed to her and carefully lifted the girl into his arms. He asked her if everything was okay, and admitted that he was very happy. Sophia blushed with embarrassment and replied that she was fine. After that, she abruptly pushed Clem away and told him to stop and let her go. However, their business did not end there, as they still had to find medicinal herbs. While they were busy, Yuki and Cecilia watched them from the side and laughed quietly. Then Yuki approached the monster and began to collect magical minerals for his backpack. At that time, he thought about the fact that they still had to find medicinal herbs, and the monster, when it flew away, scattered its stones in all directions, so collecting them promised to be difficult. After a long search, they finally found what they had been looking for so long. Yuki looked up at the sky, where the full moon was already shining, and with a sigh, said that it had become completely dark around her. Clyman said that it was over, so there was no way he could go home now. He advised Yuki not to worry, to rest, and they would set off tomorrow morning. However, Yuki frowned and replied that he couldn't just relax. Then she leans over to Cecilia and quietly asks if he can fly. The girl carefully replies that it would look strange and might raise unnecessary questions. He asks the young man what will happen if someone notices them. Yuki understands that this is a big risk, but they have no time to delay. So when he approached them and asked if something had really happened, Yuki just smiled and said it was okay. He was just really tired. Sophia replied that she hadn't taken any guild quests in a while, so she wasn't in the best of moods herself. She suggested they return to the inn to rest. Yuki agreed. It was already deep night outside. Lying in his bed, Yuki couldn't sleep. His thoughts kept returning to Till and Guy, who might not live to see the morning. The young man opens his eyes and realizes that sleep is no longer coming to him. He carefully gets out of bed and sees Clayman sleeping next to him. Yuki mentally notes that a lot of time has passed since his last flight. He goes out into the dining room and sees Cecilia sitting at the table drinking tea. Yuki asked the girl in surprise what she was doing there. Cecilia smiled and said she was waiting for Yuki. She approaches him and hands him a bag of medicinal herbs. She asks the boy to give them to Sheik. Yuki nods and assures him that Cecilia's wish will be fulfilled. Cecilia noticed that Sophia was sleeping very soundly, as if today had exhausted her more than usual. She also told the innkeeper that she would look after the house while he had dinner, so if Yuki wanted to take advantage of the moment and fly away, now was the time. Yuki fully understood that Cecilia had thought of everything down to the smallest detail. He thanked her sincerely and asked why she was doing all this for him. The girl smiled and said that she was wondering whether he would dare to do it or not. She said that the owner of this house often travels somewhere, so he is not at home right now, but he will probably be back soon. Yuki notes that Cecilia is very attentive and caring. He thanks her for everything and says that he is leaving now. With a funny look, the elder waves his hand and wishes the young man to take care of himself, while Yuki goes outside. He reveals his wings and horns, and then declares that only in this form will he be able to reveal his true power. If he had a choice, he wouldn't do it, but the situation is truly urgent. Yuki heads home. He quietly sneaks into his room, thinking that even in his own home, one cannot let one's guard down. Meanwhile, Yuki enters the house and orders the gargoyle to wake up. Seeing the crack in Guy's head, he exclaims in horror that it is too late. He grabs Guy by the shoulders, starts shaking him, and begs him to wake up. Yuki starts to scold Guy, saying that he is not the person he wants to be at all, and asks if he will really just back down and leave the girl to her fate. Suddenly, Guy is startled from his sleep and shouts at the boy to be quiet and not make noise. The protagonist breathes a sigh of relief and mentally thanks fate that he managed to cope. Guy notes that after the young man disturbed his last dream, the path itself tells him what to do next. Yuki agrees, and insists that Guy eat something first. He quickly stuffs the magic minerals into his mouth. The young man says loudly that he will explain everything later, but for now he must follow Yuki's order. Guy begins to crunch the magical minerals and admits that he doesn't understand at all what goal this young man is pursuing. Suddenly, the cracks on Guy's body gradually disappear. Gargoyle looks around in surprise, not understanding how this happened. Yuki sighs in relief and reports that he is now fine. Guy loudly warned the young man not to put anything in his mouth under any circumstances. Yuki apologized, explaining that he was just in a hurry. Guy says that everything was delicious, so there's no point in rushing. Yuki asks if Guy is really talking about the minerals. He hands me the bag and says that there's still half of it left. Guy smiles happily and says he won't leave a single crumb behind. He'll eat it all to the last one. Yuki realized that Guy was so engrossed in these minerals that he didn't even notice her little tricks. At that moment, he was beaming with happiness like a child, and he was savoring the delicious food with delight. Guy pulls out one of the minerals and wonders what it is. Yuki looks at it closely and guesses that it must be the horn of a stone eater, and mentally remembers how it got there. Meanwhile, Guy unexpectedly decides to eat the horn. He is surprised to notice that this stone has a completely different taste than the previous ones. Suddenly, he screams loudly, trying to understand why his whole body suddenly started to burn with heat. Yuki was scared and did not know what to do. Guy beamed with happiness and started shouting that he was incredibly cool. A frightened Yuki excitedly asked if he was okay. Suddenly, Guy appears in his true form. His arm is back in place, and powerful wings unfold behind his back. She and Yuki looked at each other, not understanding what had just happened. Yuki remembered how Guy had grown wings and horns. It must have been the result of the power left over from the mutant who ate rocks. Yuki warns him that he has little time and should leave now. He bids the gargoyle a warm farewell, taking one last look at his unusual acquaintance. He arrived at Cecilia's estate, opened the door to the room where Till was lying on the bed, and the sheik was next to her. Yuki believed that Sheik had been with Till the whole time. And anyway, this girl is really important to him. Yuki wakes Shika up and asks him to wake up. He says he brought some healing herbs. Shika, still half conscious, asks Yuki who he is. Then he opens his eyes and asks the captain why he looks like that, because he looks like some kind of demon. Yuki replies that it's temporary. Yuki hands Shika the bag and the herbs he asked for. He is in a hurry, so he asks Shika to take care of Till. Shika greets him back. Yuki sits in a tree and thinks it's time to go back. He flies to Clayman, Cecilia, and Sophia, but before that, he tears off his own horns and wings. Upon returning, Yuki lies down in bed and thinks about how tired he is, and that right now, all he wants to do is sleep. The next morning, Sophia wakes Yuki up. She gently asks the boy to wake up. Yuki slowly opens his eyes, still completely sleepy, and tries to recognize who is standing in front of him. The girl explains that since she and Clayman didn't wake up on time, she had to wake them up herself. She says it's time to go back to Manurva. Yuki opens his eyes and realizes that it's really time to go home. But there's no need to rush now. A little while passed. Everyone was already sitting in the carriage, but Yuki was swaying from side to side. Cecilia saw this and asked anxiously if the young man was okay. Clayman sarcastically asked what he was doing at night that made him sleep so much. Sophia joked that she had seen him sleep soundly. Yuki felt so exhausted that he couldn't even find the strength to answer. He apologized and honestly admitted that he really wanted to sleep. He lay with his head resting on Cecilia's lap. She bent over him and smiled gently, her eyes full of kindness. After a while, Cecilia turned to the young man resting on her lap and quietly asked if he had woken up yet. She informed him that they were almost there. The boy got up from the girl's lap, laughed happily, and remarked that the bond between Cecilia and Yuki was so close that even sleeping with his head on the girl's lap looked very cute. Yuki understood what the man was saying and apologized. Cecilia smiled and assured him that everything was fine, and she was not offended at all. She thanked Yuki and wondered if yesterday had really been such a busy and eventful day for him. Yuki looked at the smiling Cecilia and thought that no matter how difficult the trials were, receiving such a reward was truly worth all the effort. Then he said that as soon as he got home, he would go straight to bed. Clayman remarked that he had already slept and wanted to go out for a meal, but Yuki decided not to go with them. A few days later, Till sat in tears at Yuki's house. She was truly relieved to know that Mr. Gargoyle was okay. She sincerely regretted that she had never been able to visit him. The guy apologized to her for making her worry. He admitted that he hadn't told her anything earlier because he didn't want her to worry about him. He sincerely apologized to her again. Yuki tried to fall asleep while listening to the conversation and asked the guy why he was apologizing. She hadn't blamed him for anything, and then suggested they discuss something else. Guy turns to Yuki, looks him in the eye and says that all of his achievements are due to this young man, and he is sincerely grateful to him. Till agrees with Guy, adding that he feels great gratitude towards Yuki. They never tired of thanking him. The protagonist lay there at that moment, thinking about everything, and his eyes gradually became glued together. Till thanked Cecilia and Yuki again, and Yuki thought that Till and Guy had truly become closer and understood each other better now. The girl happily hugged the gargoyle, and it brought her true joy. The main character decided to leave home and told the others that he would no longer bother them. A few days later, Yuki also realized that Till was already going to Guy's place. Till came to Gargoyles almost every day, and together they would come up with various pranks and arrange funny antics. At this moment, Yuki watches them closely. The young man realizes that he will not be able to live in such a tense atmosphere forever. To be honest, they both almost died recently, so their behavior is completely understandable. He just needs to wait a little and be patient. However, he cannot leave the house all the time. From time to time, he goes out into the city streets, walks through familiar neighborhoods, and reflects that he has already walked almost the entire area, but has not seen anything interesting. Then he turns his attention to the crowd and wonders why so many people have gathered here. Curious, he approaches a passerby to find out what is going on. A beastman approaches Yuki and asks if they have met before. Yuki smiles and greets him. The man says that after the defeat of the Demon Lord, trade in the exchange market has increased significantly. Now you can even find rare artifacts here. Yuki thinks this is very cool news. He says goodbye to the beastman, noting that it is rare to encounter such a lively atmosphere. He wants to take a walk and see what is interesting here. He can already feel his mood improving. Then the young man notices a man walking by and decides to greet him, coming closer. Yuki asked the man what he was doing here and if he was really here to shop, and also asked if there was anything new in the guild. The man replied that he had taken the day off and his presence had nothing to do with that stone eater. Kleiman admits that he needs to buy a gift for his wedding anniversary, but he has no idea what to get Sophia. Yuki jokes in response that the man seems to have only just realized the importance of the date and was a little late in preparing. Yuki remarked that perhaps Kleiman could find something here. The man asked if the young man really thought so, then added that that was why he had come to this place. Yuki offered the man his help, and Clemens allowed him to do as he saw fit. Yuki then asked the man to look in his direction. The main character smiles at him, showing off a cute headband with cat ears. Yuki is sure that this hairpin will go perfectly with the maid's outfit. This is exactly the style that Kleiman likes. He offers to give him this piece of jewelry, but the man refuses indignantly, saying it's not his style at all, and he would never agree to take it. He says it's an anniversary gift, so the guy should stop his jokes. Yuki apologizes and says he just forgot. The man admits that he doesn't feel like himself today and asks if everything is okay. He notes to himself that he must be a little excited. After everything he's been through, it's only now that things are better that his mood has finally improved. He gives the money to the seller, who secretly puts the jewelry in the man's backpack. He wants to make fun of him. Suddenly, Yuki starts to exclaim loudly that he noticed something incredibly cool. Clem immediately turns to him to find out what he's talking about. He asks the man to pay attention to this black color and explains that it is a long cloak, usually worn by children suffering from 8th grader syndrome. The girl notes that the guy has great taste. From the material to the design, this coat is without a doubt the best. Yuki says he's taking it. Then he starts picking up different things because everything around him seems incredibly interesting and cool. The man, glancing at the huge bag over the young man's shoulders, said that he thought the boy had gone a little overboard. Yuki admitted that he rarely had time to buy anything for himself, so he decided to take the opportunity and buy everything he needed. Watching him, Clayman noticed that the boy was choosing rather strange things. Yuki replies that he always buys what his heart desires, a heart that still lives in the fantasy world of an 8th grader. Clayman just smiles and remarks that this boy's soul is truly extraordinary. But in the end, he adds that he has found everything he needs, so he doesn't worry anymore. The protagonist examines with interest the gift from Clayman, a set of exotic spices and a new apron. He even mentally notes that Clayman has a real knack for choosing gifts. Then the hero realizes that the shopping is already over and asks where they are going next. The man suggests taking on a new guild project, since he's already helped the guy choose a gift. Yuki enthusiastically exclaims that it's a great idea. The plaintiff asks if he really thinks so. Yuki asks the man to wait, quickly runs around the corner to change clothes, and returns almost immediately. Soon the boy appears before everyone in a strange appearance. He is wearing a black helmet, a black cloak, and a huge sword hanging from his back. He laughed and asked Clayman how he liked his new look. The man, in response, asked if the young man sometimes played tricks on him. Yuki turns around abruptly, showing off his sword, which shines like lightning. With a smile, he notes that there is no point in arguing anymore, because he hasn't felt such elation in a long time. He loudly exclaims that now no one will stop him. Clayman scratches his ear, thinking that this guy is completely incorrigible, and if he says anything now, it will only make things worse.